Greetings, gamers. It's time again for another campaign diary in Fontera. You may recall things last left off in Diary 2 with a session out to explore the wildlands and fighting some goblins and kobolds. A lot has happened since then. I'll try to catch you up. The best of my recollection, there's been about a month's worth of adventures. In Fontera time, that's a lot of stuff. To the best of my recollection, players have done a few key things. Players have begun to suss out that there are different kinds of kobolds running around in the world. The size of the game has grown to about 15 players. Some players one player who was with us is no longer with us. It's our first player loss. And when I say that, I don't mean that they died. I just mean that they left the campaign. And a lot of learning along the way. One of the neat things that I found out about Fontera along the way is that I learn a lot by DMing Fontera. It's more than I've ever learned at DMing. I probably, from the last 2 months of running Fontera, both before and after I got married, and even running it on my honeymoon, of the last 2 months of running Fontera, I probably learned just as much or more than I had the entire year and a half before I had been DMing a homebrew campaign for friends. And it's largely due to the fact of how frequently we'll play in Fontera. Fontera has had games sometimes day after day after day, several times a week. There's been about maybe 3 games on average a week, not counting player solo sessions. We've had a number of players join the game. I will take a look at the roster here in my server. One of the most notable advancements has been the oncoming of a new co-DM. Now, this co-DM is a phenomenal help to me because with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, keep going, 16, about 16 players, it's definitely becoming necessary to keep up with the flow. Let's try to start from where we left off. Now, when last we left off, I believe in Campaign Diary 1, I had mentioned that the players planned to meet up again a few days afterwards. They did, and here's what happened. The party was as it stood before. It was Sir Reginald Quinton Watson, Delmarev Sean, the bronze, right? Yes, bronze Dragonborn Cleric, Ligart, the gold Dragonborn Paladin, Kakram, the human Warlock, Kurt, the human Barbarian, and I think that's it. Taking a rest at the end of their session, and planning to take on the rest when they came back. That was session 1. So session 3 probably should be that one. That one ran a little long, and it was the first big combat of Fontera, this campaign. And we learned a lot. One of the things that we learned is that it's extremely important to keep the right attitude going during combat and not let things bog down. I'm kind of proud that during that particular session, I stopped a conversation from going to where I perceived to be a negative place, that of conspiring versus the DM instead of working with the DM. And I felt that was contrary to the spirit of what I'm trying to run. So I'm kind of proud of myself that I got the courage up to nip that in the bud. Normally I'm a very passive person, and I find it really hard to stand up to people, especially my friends. This being Fontera online mostly probably helps with that a little bit, but I still have my problems with it from time to time. Nope, I don't need. You can see the video shift a little bit. Maybe not. I don't know. Whatever it is, I'll stop for a little bit. So that's been something that I learned how to do, is to start to stand up to players who maybe need a reiteration of something. That session was pretty memorable for how long that combat took. It took the entirety of the rest of the session. I believe it was a pretty lengthy combat with a lot of combatants, and it wound up with the capturing of a goblin, the slaying of a hobgoblin, a bugbear, and a few more goblins. And Delmar Sean took the goblin to be a captive. And I believe maybe that session, that particular combat, The entire most of the entire session was combat. That particular session had two combats, and that's part of the reason why. Now that particular session had one combat. It was sort of a warm-up encounter with against four wargs, and Kakram the human warlock had decided to, probably to get a laugh more than anything, decided to adopt a dead warg as its pet. But another thing that came out of that session was a practice of rolling in the open. I mentioned that in session diary, campaign diary 2, I think, and I mentioned the practice of rolling in the open, the things that I wanted to try out to see how they helped the game. It came into play that session. Now I remember a time early in the campaign when it was just Shannon and Sir Reginald, and they were exploring this shadowy burrow of some of these uh, goblin cultists had begun to clear out. And one of the things I noted to them back here during that session was that they weren't obligated to fight everything I put in front of them. They were not intended to do that, and they were under no constraint that they had to think that they did. So one of the things that wound up coming into play from that in campaign session 3 was, Sir Reginald decided, being the rogue amongst a paladin, a cleric, a barbarian, that he needed to be the one who drew the wargs off of the rest. His mistake in that, tactically speaking, uh, was to lure them out too far out to be able to help once the wargs overwhelmed him. There were a couple of things notable about that combat I remember. The first being that Sir Reginald fully intended that these wargs might take him to zero, might kill him. He fully intended that that might happen, and it would be counter to his expectations for me to allow it to go any other way. I kind of understood that and felt the need to enforce that these creatures tend to behave reasonably, and when offered something like that, they're going to do that. One of the things about that combat was I made the wargs act somewhat intelligently, which intrigued the players. I'll tell you why. I made the wargs act so they were protecting things. I didn't want to have the standard run at them and bite them and have the standard while they're attacking us, so we'll kill them. Instead, I had the wargs sort of pen the party in, two from the front and two from the sides, to sort of pin and box the party in, so they would, to try to enforce this method that the wargs might be fending them off from something and guarding them off from something. I noted that, in the as the DM, noting what their actions were, whether they were readying actions to do certain things, to make it clear to the players this is what they were intending to do, as I felt the players' characters would probably know and understand what these wargs were doing. They did decide to go ahead and maneuver their way around the wargs as best they could, and like I said, Sir Reginald decided to try and skirt that and draw them off the rest, and it completely worked. I felt that it was completely reasonable to have the wargs do that, and I also felt later that I realized later that that was probably the best thing I could have had happen there, because not only did I said Sir Reginald expected that to happen, but B, was also believable for everyone else, and it sort of reinforced the idea. Thirdly, sort of reinforced the idea that they're not supposed to fight everything, and they're not supposed to take everything at face value. That I intend for them to draw their own conclusions about combat. And one of the things that happened there was Sir Reginald did go down. He almost died. I began to sort of conspire with the players to sort of give them information to figure out this is about how long he has. That, of course, they're in on him rolling the death saves. I've heard tell of other DMs having death saves be made in secret, but I don't see much need for that. It sort of creates an artificial barrier, while players are already disposed to, and I see their inclination. Players are disposed to think mechanically, okay, they've just got to make three death saves before they make three death fails, successes before fails, and then they're failures, and then they're good. They'll counter to zero, and we can continue fighting without them. But I can see how some DMs would want to enforce the idea of, you don't know how much time your friend has. You could possibly lose them. Anything could be deadly. That might or might not work for Fontera. I don't know. What I have generally been practicing is a level of full disclosure with the players. It's not me versus the players. I'm not playing a gotcha game with them. I'm not saying, well, I know more than you because I created the world, and you make a mistake and I'll punish you for it. It's much more intended to be, I've built the world for you to play in it, and I'm more than happy to see what you whip up. It's been one of the better parts of DMing I've found, to have that level of surprise for what the players are going to do. So I found that a lot of fun, part of that, and found out that was probably the best thing I could have done, because, like I said, Sir Reginald did almost die. He failed 2 death saves before anyone got to him, and they started brainstorming ways that they could do that. Sean started asking if he could cast Cure wounds is a bonus action. That's not in line with the rules. We also had a rules lawyer. I use that term loosely. Rules lawyer player, just someone who knows the rules and tends to stick to them. And I do tend to enforce that kind of thing. As Fontera is currently PHP only, so the rules matter a lot. So I do sort of tend to reinforce that kind of idea. So we had another player who said this, who would know that's not according with the rules, and might feel that I'm sort of giving them something, and I didn't want them to be that. I didn't want it to be I made the character live or die. I wanted it to be the players made the character live or die. Um, they decided to do the best they could. We kind of figured out that making a medicine check isn't necessarily stated as an action or not. So we decided that the Sean could dash up to him using his movement and then a dash action to get to him to Sir Reginald, and then use a medicine action to try and stabilize. This was the only roll that would that would help Sir Reginald. Fortunately, it was a DC of 10, just like all death say all wisdom checks are to stabilize some medicine checks to stabilize someone, and I believe Sean got a 12, and it was just enough to make it successful. For fun, they decided to see if Sir Reginald would have rolled a success or a fail on that last death save. He had already cured two fails and no successes. The third one would have been a failure, and he would have died there. And the characters all knew that. The players all knew that. And I think that reinforced the idea that the world is deadly for these new players. And that may or may not have proved to be a good thing. In the time since, it's sort of been created, it might have helped create a spirit of playing it safe. Of course, players always want to play it safe. They never want to take risks, myself included. I'm no different. We don't want to take risks that we feel outside of our wheelhouse, and it sort of is. It's sort of as a dick move as a DM to sort of to take the ability to make that choice away from players and force them into situations like that. Now, I'm not saying it can't be a good thing. I just find that it's generally the move of someone who's an a-hole DM to try and take away all powers from the players and throw as hard stuff as they can at them for the sake of their sadistic joy. I don't really find that that's very productive, and I think DMs who do that are missing the point of the game. The point of the game isn't for you to have knowledge over your players and to lord it over them, and to play, like I said, a gotcha game with them, or to outsmart them, outthink them, or whatever. It's good to have monsters attempt to do that. It's good to have their enemies attempt to fight them reasonably, giving them tactics and intelligence to make a challenge for the combat. But I think overpowering enemies just lead to players feeling like they're not strong enough no matter what they do, and none of it matters. And so and honestly, if you're the kind of DM who feels like you need to put your players against stuff like that, why are you involving the players at all? It's been said before, why don't you just write a book? Um, so all that is to say that I don't try to do that in Fontera. I'm trying to create something totally different. And so far it seems to have produced good results. And I don't entirely think players' caution as a general play base is a bad thing. Um, like I've said, I've learned a lot from Fontera, and that's partly due to the fact that we played so often, partly to the fact that there's so many players on Fontera. So the players. So I've already mentioned Sir Reginald and Shannon and Ligard and Sean and Gakram and Kurt. Kurt didn't necessarily leave, but Kurt sort of went inactive and never came back. So I just went ahead and said, we're moving on without that person. During the course of that, let's see, that would have been a couple days before we left. And the session when we left on our honeymoon trip. The first one would have been with Edwin Rowland's first session with Sir Reginald and Kakram. A few other people, I think. Will the Halfling. And overall, I think it kind of made I learned from that I don't like having first level player adventuring with higher level characters who are pushy, who are, for to put it nicely, uh, interested in hogging the limelight. Maybe not as nice, but I sort of learned what kind of players I cannot bring on a first level expedition. And Sir Reginald was a good one. That should have been fine as a sort of a guide, and he sort of takes pride in the thing. He's very much a good role player and a good player in general. Sir Reginald would have been good. Will might have been okay, but given what's happened since then, I won't go into details. But Will isn't left anymore. Will isn't with us anymore. He's the one I mentioned who has been asked to leave by me. Um, Will might have been okay. I think Kakram was the biggest offender. And there have been one other player who's joined who's sort of in that same vein. I've noticed that the difference seems to be on the surface, it looks like for players who this is their second, game, their secondary game, that they treat it as such, that they treat it as a throwaway game to get their kicks in between their real games. And I mean, not only is that insulting to me, it's also wasting the other player's time. And so I'm doing what I can to sort of limit that because I don't know that I can speak to their motives as I'm not inside their head. What I can do is limit their ability to harm other players' sessions. So I've made it my policy going forward from that point, having learned from that, level one characters might need a bit of session of their own without other characters around, maybe a solo session, maybe a group of them, like I've done. I've done one of those in between then and now, of level ones to include an established player to help them sort of get started and get oriented around the world, maybe. But give them a chance to establish their character before they have to fight for the stage with more camera hungry individuals. On the surface, it appears that those individuals are getting their kicks on the side in a secondary game. It's been a couple of people I've felt that about. And like I said, I can't speak to their motivations, I'm not inside their head. What I can do is make observations, and that observation is the surface level one. I think the problem is deeper than that. You see, at first, I liked Will. I liked Will's character and I liked Will's playing because Will was a role player. More and more, that's what I'm trying to do with Fontera is create a role playing community. For characters like Kakram, this is less a role playing experience, although there is an element of role play to his character. It's not necessarily character driven role play. It's more to trying to joke and have a good time and a bit of a mad scientist approach, doing wild things for the sake of comedy. Now, I don't really have a problem with that, strictly speaking. As a matter of fact, I personally enjoy Kakram's antics, and the other player I still currently have, who I feel like that about. But I just feel that their role playing is weak, and I think that's the thing. I think that's what's really the crux of the issue. This other player, character named Xander, I find when I'm role DMing for him, I really have to pull it out of him to role play. I really have to make him come to me with things. Several times he's asked, "Can I make a perception check?" And I'll be like, "For what?" He's like, "To do this and that," and he'll be like, "To do X thing," and I'll say, "Look, man, if you, I don't really have anything to give you. I'm not running a railroad plot to give you the next plot coupon to go to the next thing. I don't have anything like that. That's not the game I'm running. If you don't tell me what it is you want to get out of this, I got nothing for you." Um, and it's just a way of saying I could tell you a bunch of random stuff, but that wastes my time, your time, and the rest of the players' time. And I'm not down with that. I really am finding it's more productive to have the players have a goal. Aside from that, um, so I learned that I want to have level one players have their establishing moments, not be fought for, not be fighting for the limelight with other players. There's something to be said for establishing character through that kind of interaction, but I feel that most players who come to Fontera are probably not going to want to take that approach. They're probably want to take the approach of working with me to establish some things about their characters to help them sort of get a feel for the world, get a place in the world that they're comfortable with, and generally get content and satisfied with their character and the state of their character. Now, I've worked a lot on getting Roland sort of paid back for that stuff, and to run solo sessions to establish his character. More on that in just a minute. So the next session I remember running was, I'm gonna say, the next session that I really remember running. Let's see. So I mentioned the introduction of. Yeah, I think that's it. It was actually the introduction of Xander. Ligart Will. Xander's level one. and Nathan, Nathan, who it was, who I haven't seen since then, and I'm pretty sure isn't coming back. Um, went on an expedition and found some of my favorite creatures. Now I had solo done a solo session for my wife's character. She was then my fiance. No, no, she was then my wife. Yeah, we'd got married. Yeah, we got married when we did that. I'm sure. One of the days we came home and it was quiet. No, no, we didn't. Did we? I don't remember. I really don't. But at one point before this, it's what I know. One point before this, I had run a solo session for her monk character Wufang, and Wufang had journeyed into the forest. And one of the things that I had set with Wufang was a pixie. And so the first thing that Wufang did was try to make friends with this pixie. Wufang felt much the same as Shannon did in terms of being diplomatic with enemies and not making enemies where they didn't have to. Long story short, Wufang had made a friend of this sprite, got this sprite to agree to take Wufang to, to the Sprite Queen, and from there had begun to establish a presence of the Fey creatures in Tremel Forest. So to this point, there's been kobolds, goblins, and Fey creatures in Tremel. So that's pretty interesting. The introductory session um, for Xander and Nathan came along with Ligard and Will, and halfway through that session, Will had to leave. And it's not uncommon necessarily in Fontera for that to happen, but it was sort of beginning to reveal a problem with Fontera. And that was that when I'm running a game that's at the player's discretion, it's at the player's scheduling, um, and when I'm placing the keys in the hands of the players to schedule it, some players begin to see that as license to schedule it on, I don't want to say on their terms because that's the point, is scheduling on their terms. They see it as license to do pickup games. And the problem with pickup games is they tend to pick up and drop in to other players' sessions. Now, it wasn't necessarily any fault of Will's for that. I think what happened was a surprise. But he did, I mean, no, it wasn't a surprise. He knew about it before the session started. But at that point, I was still sort of green in Fontera and sort of allowed it to go on. And so Lightheart, Will, and the two level ones, and Kakram actually, ventured out into the forest. And so I had, Kakram fighting for the limelight again. I had the level one struggling to find a place, and Kakram, they encountered some more of the fake creatures, particularly a satyr, a blink dog, and a pixie. And so I think they were taking the lead of some of the other players. Now, let me tell you about the kind of players that we have here. Now, Lightheart is the kind of player who invests in the world. He takes it very seriously. He role plays his actions out. He cares about the character he's playing and the attitudes they have. And it's really flattering to have a character play like that, to have any player play like that. As a side note, as a result of working with him for so long, that particular player is now the person who is sitting in co-DM with me, who I'm getting sort of grafted in, grandfathered into Fontera, and sort of giving him the rundown on everything. And it's sort of coming out that I've been sort of seat of my pantsing this whole thing, and it's all in here. So now I have to record it to give it to him. I have to give him, resources like these videos, and then write down a lot of stuff that I just have in my head and just know, because I'm the one who thought it all up and made it all up on the spot and make notes of anything that's important, that I have to, to then transfer over to him, which is an interesting process. But more on that later. So that's who Lightheart is. Kakram is, like I mentioned, sort of Kakram is by nature a jester character, which is, like I said, a very endearing character. It's just not very strong on the kind of role play I'm trying to encourage. Will's sort of semi-strong in the role play, but I think Will's player had intentions that were sort of contrary to my plan. And more on that a little bit as things developed. So the next session after that, we had, so that particular session, we have Xander, a Dragonborn Barbarian, and Nathan, a human, I think, Druid, coming out with them on this thing, and they fight these pixies. So you have a basic rundown of what these characters are like, and so it seems like, at first, Kakram's action is just to attack them. If they're enemies, it's an encounter, or at least it seems that they're enemies. They could reasonably be enemies. It's an encounter. He decides he wants to fight it. So that's what they did. Moving it again. Sorry. So that's what they did. He decided to fight it. So Xander used his breath weapon on the pixie, basically takes it out in one breath. It was kind of cool, but it was just role playing that, and I kind of got some ideas about what kind of encounters should be combat and what kind of encounters should be social, and sort of having a plan for which one for what is what whenever I run Fontera. Now, over check my board here. We're talking for 21 minutes. Okay, so 25 minutes. We're making reasonable pace with all that's happened since then. So in this session, they're sort of taking Kakram's lead and just attacking it mindlessly and not thinking there's an element of roleplay they could do in this. And it's sort of become somewhat common knowledge amongst through the write-ups that these fake creatures are out here, and they're not all bad. Some of them are good. In fact, I only intend for these fake creatures to be enemies, so long as the players treat them like such. I gave the Fey hierarchy in the courts a sort of intelligence to it, and so it has a bit of nobility to it. And it sort of shows in that encounter the mixed attitudes. It was very interesting. At first, everyone's gung ho to fight them, possibly Lightheart even included, just getting caught up in it. But as it comes out that this satyr in this cares for this blink dog, its companion, and as it's trying to save it and escape with its life, the satyr and the blink dog, maybe Sir Lightheart sort of begins to realize these are real creatures. I mean, that's exactly the kind of thing he would do, is sort of treat them like, oh, these are real things, and we're hurting them for no reason. So he tries to convince his party members, non-confrontationally and through example, maybe it's the better idea to let them leave. And so he sort of starts. He wants to almost PvP, but I won't let him. Fontera is strictly no PvP. No powers used on friendlies. You don't rob them. You don't, you know, you know, grapple them with the intent to take away their agency or anything like that, unless the two players agree to it, and they hadn't done that. So I didn't allow Lightheart to. He was really creative about it. I didn't allow Lightheart to use his compelled duel spell to try and stop anyone from attacking it, because I ruled that would be PvP. That's using your spell on another player, and I just won't allow it. It's just once you've gone to that place, I feel you've violated your player's agency by allowing one player's agency to take precedence over another, and you create a situation where you've lost trust as the DM because you've given up. You've given up your verdict seat as the judge, and you've instead forfeited it to the player who wanted to PvP in whatever form that took. I didn't want that to happen, so I didn't. Instead, Lightheart starts trying to subtly convince the rest of the party to let them live. It works on Nathan. Nathan starts trying to help them live. Xander and Kakram still have plans to kill them all, to the man. I don't, strictly speaking, have a problem with that. I just realized that maybe I'm presenting different things to different people. One of the things that Fontera has done is brought a lot of different player styles to the same table and forced me, in the driver's seat, the DM seat, to coordinate with them all and make them all work together. Sometimes they don't work together at all, meaning they will not mix no matter what I do. Sometimes I can gently massage them to make them work. After all, that's the job of the DM, is to sit in the pilot seat and try to make this ship go where the players want to go, where the players can reasonably go. That's not to say I give in to their every whim and give them everything they ever ask for, and when they roll a d20 they succeed on everything forever, because that's not how the real world works. But I do try to make a situation where they can try anything, and reasonably, if it has a reasonable chance of working, of solving the problem, letting it work to some degree. Now, if they roll close enough to the DC but don't roll exactly at the DC, it can work to a degree. I can work in degrees. I can work on a sliding scale. It's all fine. And one lesson I took away from that session was to reconsider what I threw as combat encounters at the players and what I threw as maybe possibly social encounters. It opened up the possibility of different types of encounters in Fontera, not just being combat encounters of easy, medium, hard, and deadly, but opening up to social and exploration encounters, which Fontera desperately needs. That stuff isn't coming, the social encounters aren't coming from the king wants to see you and so-and-so is sending you on a job. This is entirely player-driven, from their own goals and what they want to do. It isn't a thing of I'm handing them a quest hook, for the most part. The first game was that, but for the most part, it has been that. Instead, it opens up the idea to me that maybe I need to reevaluate what kind of encounters I'm throwing at players. If I intend for these pixie and fairies, these fae folk, to be possible allies or neutral parties or what have you, social encounters, maybe don't put them for A against a party of people who are primarily going to treat it as a combat, like Kakram, Will, and possibly Xander. Instead, maybe play something more normal at them, like a big animal, like a giant beast or something like that, or a kobold or a goblin, something. Some of the things I intend to be enemies, and it sort of makes this into less a game of chance and more design. Makes me design a bit more and roll the dice for chance a bit less, which I'm actually kind of fine with. I need to learn how to do that kind of thing anyway, and it sort of forces me into that role. So I'm kind of very much in favor of that, actually. So from this session, I go into a session with Will and Ligart because Nathan and Xander had to leave. Again, we knew that and we had planned for that. That's not so much a big deal. Will was able to come back at the tail end of that, and so Kakram wandered off to do his own thing, I think, and Will and Lightheart decided to explore the thing they came out to explore. And it's kind of cool what happened. So they get to this abandoned ancient Overwatch tower. It's an old military outpost in Fontera. And it's about 3 miles out, and it sits triangularly with, Drunwell and this wizard's tower, this old wizard's tower. And I thought them up as just places for loot. They're just places that would have been here that could find something magical in there. And it doesn't really matter what, it just, well, actually, it does matter. In the ancient Overwatch, they established to be kind of armor, weapons, that type of gear. And the wizard's tower, magic items and potions and books and spell scrolls. Kind of screwed up on that one too, but more on that later. Because 3 of these games happened in one day. It was amazing. Again, lots and lots of game experience, all in short amounts of time. So this is session number 2 that day. Session number 2 that day is Lightheart and Will continuing on to what they were doing originally, going out to the tower. This combat happened in the middle as they were stopped on the way. It's what they rolled the dice with. Again, lessons in randomness versus design. So they get out to the tower. They start exploring it and looting it a little bit. Lightheart upgrades his armor. Will find some things for he wants to do with his NPCs, creating like a leatherworking group, cutting out the hostile NPC and working with the 2 friendly NPCs, sort of making like a little leatherworkers guild for the 3 of them, and he provides all the leathers and they work on. So he's looting all the leathers. So we have this situation where Will's here to loot and Lightheart is here to explore, maybe get some loot. At the top of the tower, I narrate the tower in a very freeform, maybe not freeform way, but I was sort of seat of my pants in the tower a little bit. In that I didn't have a full plan for what was going to be out there, and I didn't actually expect him to make it all the way out there. Sorry for whatever that's worth. If you're watching this, I'm sorry. So Lightheart and Will go through this tower, and I do my best to make it reasonably with a few traps, lots of gear, loot, organizing the gear by tier. D6 weapons and light armors on the first floor, medium armors and D8 weapons, heavy armors and D10 weapons, and so on and so forth, up to the very top floor. When they get to the roof, they sort of detect that there's something up there, sort of trying to bar the trap door up there, because each level of this tower is built around a spiral staircase, and at the top of the spiral staircase, each 15 feet up, is a trap door that opens up to the next floor. And so they're going up these trap doors, and they're finding traps or things in the tower as they do. When they make it up to the top floor, they sense that there's a creature on the roof of the tower. And so I had the idea for who that would be by this point, and I had the idea for who it was because I had placed bodies in the tower. At the first floor, they found what appeared to be a human male's body, stripped of its armor and punctured with a giant blade. Another floor up, they didn't find anything, and 2 more floors up than that, they found 2 more bodies, a dwarf female and a halfling female. This is sort of where Lightheart begins to connect the dots, because as I'm creating this on the fly, this is what's thing, because I've already had these pieces in my head, I decided to go ahead and place them here. I needed a place for them to be anyway, and this was something to put there that would sort of explain something else, maybe help tie up a few loose ends story-wise in the story of Fontera, and provide a bit of content for that, what I badly needed that one, because I was very much already sort of beginning to burn out. More on that in a bit. And so when they get to the top floor, they find this half elf woman who seems to be very scared and she's alone. And they talk to her a little and they find out her name is Lyric. She mentions someone named Kinley who drew the orcs away, as that's who made this attack. That's who she says made this attack, the orcs away, heading west into the forest. And Ligart goes, "Holy crap, you're Lyric. You're one of the original adventurers who came out here." And she says, "Yes, I am." And he's so overjoyed to find one of the original adventurers, as he had written in his backstory that they were the reason, hearing about them was the reason he gave up his quiet old life and came to Fontera to be an adventurer. So getting to find one of them was an amazing thing for him. I didn't know that. I just was putting content there that I could. It was pretty rewarding. Will didn't care, which was fine, because Ligart cared. Ligart cared that there was something there, and it validated that to me that it was interesting him. I think from a perspective of when I'm a player, I think it's because it tied into his backstory. When I'm a player, I love stuff that ties into my backstory in any way. It's relevant in a way that I believe, in a way that's believable. It's always just a suspension of disbelief. You can suspend my disbelief about it. I am over the moon, especially about discovering new things or realizing new things. All about it. So I think that's why that interested him so much. So while Will got what he wanted, Ligard got some what he wanted, and then found more that he actually kind of wanted. He didn't know he wanted. So Ligard takes Lyric back to Trenwell, safeguards her, and helps her get back to healing. We go through this role play thing over several days of him helping her, and it's sort of taking over his main project of creating a bridge over the chasm that they discovered in their first adventure, I think. At least the first one I documented. And it's sort of taken over that main project for him, which again is fine. It's totally up to him. And it's really nice to have a bit of story there, and the wheels start turning in my head. I know that Kinley's still out there. I gave the hook for where she is, and I have to figure out what I'm going to do with that and how. Because I've hinted that they're orcs, because I knew that there needed to be a little bit more than goblins and kobolds, and the fey folk, goblinoids and kobolds and the fey folk out here in Fontera. And over time, that's fleshed out into different types of goblins, different tribes of goblins, some who are worshippers of a dark god, some who aren't. Different colors of kobolds coming into the thing as a result of the player's actions. For example, in that session, Will and Ligart had stumbled into a kobold falconer who had, I think it was a bronze kobold falconer, who they actually beat it down with all of its hit points, didn't have very many hit points. And then Ligart decided to heal it back up and send it off, scaring it. And so I rolled a d4 and added 2, and it rolled, I think, a 3. So I thought to myself, in 5 days, game time, this kobold needs to come back with reinforcements. And that plays into something that happens way later that begins to expand the game. Now, game 3 that day. So I've had game 1 with the group, game 2 with Ligart and Will, and game 3 is with my family, my wife, my best friend, and my brother and sister-in-law. At the time, we're staying in my brother and sister-in-law's house. And so I decided I want to run a game for my brother and sister-in-law who didn't get to play D&D very much. Wanted to include my wife and my best friend. Figured it'll be good for us all to play. Fontera is my setting right now, and I can work that with that. My wife's character is already established with Fong, and has this quest hook to go to this magic tower, the Mage's Tower. And that morning we had been in Walmart. And this just shows that inspiration for D&D can come from the randomest places. It just shows that as a DM, you can always be thinking Dungeons and Dragons. Everything relates to Dungeons and Dragons. It's fantastic. So we're in Walmart. We're shopping for something totally not related. I think we're shopping for towels. I think we planned to go to the pool that day. I think our plans were kind of ruined. Pool wasn't open. And we're shopping for stuff. We go by the toy section in Walmart. And my wife's best friend gets scared by a toy going off as she walks past it. And we come to see what it was. We were shopping for something else. and it's this cute little dinosaur toy that you feed toy food to. And it makes these cute little sounds, and it's absolutely adorable. This little big-headed raptorling, it reminds me a lot of Yoshi. And I'm just thinking, this kind of thing would be perfect to do in the game tonight because I've already been planning to run this game for a few days, even a few weeks. Been planning to run this for them, and I'm just thinking I need to come up with something to do for them. And I thought these little dino creatures would be perfect. Now, how do I get them into Fontera? It was actually pretty easy, knowing that Wufong had the quest hook to go to the Mage's Tower, knowing that Wufong had interaction with the fairy folk, and knowing that thinking that reading into the sort of the Feywild and the DMG, the Feywild is a place of potential. It's the potential that the world had, the material plane had, untainted by the touch of the sentient races, for lack of a better word, mankind. Be that humans, elves, dwarves, halflings, tieflings, drow, dragonborn, or otherwise, any intelligent race. The Feywild is the potential that the world could have been. And I thought, if the Feywild is the world's potential, it's what the world would have been. It makes perfect sense to put dinosaurs there, doesn't it? I had already, now based on what I know of the Feywild from playing Dungeons and Dragons video games, notably never went to the MMO, which I'm back to playing now. Now, what I know about that is it's generally inhabited by, what you might consider to be fey creatures, uh, goblins, trolls, sometimes blights, the hags, and other types of creatures. Now, given that I've already had goblinoids in the world of Fontera, I didn't think it made sense to put them in the Feywild too. I think that would have confused the player base. So instead, I decided that there would be a different kind of besides the Fey folk from the Feywild. That would be dinosaurs, because honestly, that baby dino toy was super cute, and I thought, how great would it be to have some super cute baby dinos in the game tonight? That's what we did, and I learned something interesting from that session. Aside from that, I had a lot of fun with those baby dinos. Playing them was really fun. My brother-in-law rolled a gnome two-weapon fighting. Because I allow a free feed at level 1, it's unlocked so many interesting characters even at low levels. So my brother-in-law's character is a gnome fighter. Actually, it's not told somebody else the first gnome tonight. They're not the first gnome. It's a gnome two-weapon fighter, dual-wielder fighter with a hammer and an axe, I think. And so that's his two weapons, and he makes his two-weapon fighting attacks with dual wielding. And I thought, that's cool. His name is Tim Tam. And then my sister-in-law makes a gnome druid named Alice. And we didn't have a lot of time to make these characters before we went to play. As a matter of fact, we actually didn't get to start playing until midnight, and we stayed up until 4 a.m. playing. We were all exhausted. But it was well worth it, I think, for the story alone. Now, Wufong had already planned to go to the Mage's Tower, and I figured there was one place I could put the Mage's Tower. It could probably be a portal of the Feywild to contain these little raptorlings and explain why they weren't just running all around the forest. And that seemed to work out pretty well. On the way there, I decided to make travel a little bit as interesting as I could. I was still playing with skill challenges as a thing, so I made them do a skill challenge and tell me what they wanted to do, and it worked out fairly okay, getting them to sort of role play in the game. That's something I may use as needed now instead of on every session basis. Because while it's good, I think in abundance, it just cheapens it. So I think it's best used sparingly. But at that point, it was every game as much as I could. That's, like I said, learning. I've learned so much about DMing through Fontera. So they do a skill challenge. They have minor combat encounter with wolves. They, instead of fighting the wolves to the death, they kill a wolf and then intimidate another wolf to stimulate the other wolves to leave. And they rolled high enough on the intimidation check, I thought, to make it successful. So the other wolves left them alone, and I thought that was a great way to have a little bit of combat, but also not have it take too long, which I'm all for having combats go quicker. And so I'm always looking for ways to make combats shorter. have them wrap up in a satisfying way to take less time. And it's always it's always sort of a drag when you get a combat to a point where you know how it's probably going to turn out, barring some crazy dice rolls, and it's just dragging along. And I think the mark of a good DM is to manipulate that situation so it wraps up satisfyingly quickly. So I liked that wolf encounter worked out by the player's agency exactly that way. I went with it. I took that completely. If they'd failed that roll terribly, I couldn't have done it. But since they made it reasonably well enough, I decided to massage the situation and cooperate with what they wanted to do. And it turned out fantastically because it kept the session moving. It kept the pace up. Pacing is something I'm working on as a DM, trying to keep the pace at keep the right pace with sessions. And they have a minor encounter with an environment encounter because that's what they roll in D12. And I'm sort of finding out that maybe I need to rework this D12 table at that point. So I'm like, okay, I need to start rethinking this. So they have an environmental encounter come up, and so I decide that I had already been rolling on narration tables and figuring out that it's a sort of a stormy day. Maybe a magical storm is brewing. There's hints that it's magical anyway, and so I decided there's already a storm brewing. Lightning will strike. Lightning will strike a tree, and it will strike a tree and cut it down in such a way that it falls, diagonally against their path. So it's not just flat either way; it's cut diagonally, and its brush creates like this obstacle in their path. And it turned out players really liked that. I didn't think much of it. I personally, as the DM, did not believe that that was a very interesting encounter. Perhaps that was my mistake, because the players seemed to like it. I heard later when we were talking about interesting encounters, my wife brought up that encounter as that was an interesting encounter, and I thought, well, that's news to me. But it just goes to show you there's always something more to learn. So I'm trying not to undervalue the worth in making those kinds of encounters part of the game. Not only am I narrating the world as believable as I can, I made it my goal to narrate more of the landmarks so that players have a better sense of where they are in the wildlands and how to get there, because I'm having to make a map, right? So I'm going to make a map, maybe help to figure out where what they're going and what they're doing is. And as they're getting me a better idea of where everything is, I'm starting to work with that sometimes. Now I'm trying to narrate that. I'm trying to make things flow in a timely fashion, so that a 4-hour session contains more than one combat and a bit of narration, and then have to stop and take a long rest, and that's the end of their session. They don't get much done. Trying to get more done in shorter amounts of time. So I'm learning to sort of narrate the world in a believable way, and that these tables create a little bit of inspiration with what they do, and a little bit of inspiration goes a long, long way. Because during that first diary I mentioned the jaguar, that was a huge thing that came off a die roll. Well, it was huge. It was reasonably part of the session, believably part of the session, off a die roll. That using the die roll, using the result come up, thinking how would this work? How could this go with this? How could this go with the adventure that we're going on today? Becomes necessary so that I don't burn out on ideas and only throw one type of thing at them, because that's what I'm ingrained in. I'm trying to do something different all the time, and these tables really help me do that. So they finally get to the Wizard's Tower, right? Back to the story. They finally get to the Wizard's Tower. They start exploring it, looting it, and my sister-in-law's druid starts making friends with some little tower mice. And I use the tower mice, their fun little roleplay thing, to exposit to her that this tower isn't bothered by a lot of people. No one really comes in or out. The door's been sealed. I liked to reward the use of thaumaturgy, that door, because it was stuck, and the fighter tried to make a check to pull it open and couldn't do it. And I suggested that someone try thaumaturgy, and the bard, my wife's best friend, the tiefling bard, one of the first tieflings in my game, which is nice. The bard decides to try thaumaturgy on it, and it opens up easy because she's a tiefling. It's racial for her. Opens right away because it just opens up an unlocked door. The door wasn't locked; it was just stuck because it had swollen over time. But it's not locked, so open it goes. So, and I realized that maybe the description of thaumaturgy says that it is unlocked or unstuck door, but I like the idea that simple magic like that, can overcome small things like that. I feel like it's rewarding to the players, and certainly keeps the session going. So don't spend forever trying to open this stupid door. Door isn't a very interesting encounter. Um, at least to me, it may have been to them. Like I said, I don't really know everything about how it felt for that session, because clearly I thought that lame encounter, and I've sort of going with starting with. And on a side note, I've sort of started going with the theory that a weak encounter is better than no encounter, and I sort of started rolling with the small things to at least make it feel like there's something there, and especially with like interaction and stuff like role play stuff like that. I found that that's really rewarding for me as the DM to work those little things in to help the world feel a little more real. Now they get the door open, they start exploring the tower and looting the tower, and they roleplay with the mice to find out what the tower's like, and they find out the tower's been sealed off, and you can tell how long it's been because all these things are jumbled on my mind, but they're connected to other things, so they're coming up in groups. And so they're roleplaying with these mice, and they get up to this top floor after looting what they can to the rest of the tower. They get to this top floor, and they open the trap door, and they find these little raptor babies. And so they start fighting with raptor babies, and they stave them off. And my sister-in-law is notorious for playing evil characters, and when I say evil, I mean that the characters that she plays are absolutely ruthless. So my sister-in-law decides to take these mice in her hand, her little gnome hand, and ask them if they want to see the Feywild. And I said, yeah, they're definitely going to see the Feywild. So I roleplayed that. Yeah, you want to see the Feywild. So she sticks her hand through this Feywild portal, and because I knew there were hungry raptorlings on the other side of it that they're trying to kick back through the portal, I had the weight suddenly disappear off her hands, and her hands come back a little bit bloodied because the bites are done into it. Not enough to draw damage, but just enough to show that that's what happened. The mice are gone, eaten by the raptorlings, which was kind of a shame to me because I liked role playing those mice. That was fun, but it was also kind of funny to see my sister in law do that kind of thing to those little mice. And honestly, it didn't hurt the session at all. It only helped the players, have a good time with it. So I was all for something like that, even if I personally would have not have done that, or would have liked that to have happened to my mice, but it was what it was. Now, I could tell the players had a good time, and by this point in Fontera, I'm in my in the, by this point, by which I mean now and not then, the time I'm talking about. By that point in Fontera, I'm starting to get confident and seeing whether my players are having a good time. I'm starting to get to the point where I'm confident they had a good time or not. I'm starting to understand if they didn't have a good time, why didn't they have a good time? And I'm starting to understand if they did have a good time, why did they have a good time? To help me know whether they did or didn't. It's a little less taking them at their word and a little more reading what they say and do. Because what they say might be trying to say my feelings, but what they act like is genuine, at least most of the time. So that's the end of the third session that night. They resolved that reasonably well and decided to leave it alone. And that's the end of that session, and everyone seems to have had a good time, and we all go to sleep. Uh, get some well earned rest. Fast forward to the next session. And that was the session I learned where I wanted the players to have a plan for what they wanted to do that time, who they were bringing, to run it by me so that I knew what to prepare. Because we had a planned expedition to the chasm, given that Wufong had been given the task to clear the chasm, and Shannon wanted to fight the elementalists down there. A reuse of the same kind of dreadrot creature I had put in the shadowy burrow, to put that creature down and try to heal the land, because that's the task that Wufong has at this point. Having had another, I think, solo session by the point. So we have a session with Wufong, Shannon. Yes. Okay, but I have to go back. Roland. Okay. So trying to make it up to Roland, I decided to help him develop his character a little bit. So I've been having, in addition to other sessions, working him in, having a bit of solo session with him, and that really helped. Roland had planned to become an Eldritch Knight, but he didn't like the term Eldritch Knight. I don't blame him. And I tell him, and he asks me, is this what they're called? And I said, hey man, it's Fontera. You're the first person to do this in Fontera. You can call it whatever you want. because I'm in sort of into that idea that the world is shaped by the players in those small ways. Way back when Sir Reginald called it the Dread Rot, I went with that. I decided to reward that kind of decision, that boldness to name something. Decided to reward that by calling it that myself. A, it's what the players already are calling it. B, it's the name that they have for it to help them relate to what it is. And C, it sort of reinforces the idea that what they decide about stuff matters. It decides that the things they name things matter. It reinforces if they're into that kind of viewpoint that I think that they're right about it. So at any point, I like that kind of thing. So I tell Roland, look, man, you're the first person to do this. You can name it whatever you want. But he decides he likes the name Sword Mage. He also decides he doesn't just want to get random magic at level 3. He wants to have a basis for it, a roleplay basis. And I said, that's fantastic. So we start working out that he wants to have a session with just him to develop that aspect by talking to the local wizard, because one of the things I've established about Fontera is I've tried to make it your basic outpost has some basic things like a place to stay, a temple to for religious things, places to shop, lots of places to shop in Trenwell, a place to shop, and then some additional things, a wizard to identify items, because I don't want players who don't have a wizard to have to go without their things being identified, because I don't plan there to be a lot of magic items. I do want there to be some. And I have placed magic items in the hands of the goblin worshippers of the dark god to sort of reinforce that they're getting power from this dark god, and that they're sort of an additional threat because of it, and not just your standard dark magic casters. They're dark variants of these acolytes and priests stat blocks. So I have a solo session with Roland. It's pretty productive, and Roland decides that he wants to have some training with the mage. We'll play that out, and he has a great time. And I'm satisfied that he's having a good time, because his first time was rough, and he's sort of getting a good, a good feet. He's sort of getting good ground under his feet for his character and the direction he wants to take it. Like I mentioned, I'm all about roleplay in Fontera. I'm really trying to draw that kind of thing out and trying to encourage that. So that's what we worked out. I realize I'm going on an hour here, I'm trying to wrap this up, but I do have a lot to say, so bear with me. Now, after this, he does get to talking about this, maybe makes a quick statement about it in the chat, and my wife's character becomes interested in it, Wufang. So I have Wufang brings the magic book to the same mage, and I start talking, role playing things out over there in a session in the car. It helps keep her awake on the road trip. We've sent our friend off on a plane back home to Virginia while we're driving from Texas the rest of the way, and so we have that in the car on the way. We finally get to our stopping place the next day. We're driving for almost 2 full day and a day and a half at that point, 2 full days at that point. So we're driving for almost 2 days, and we've gotten to our destination. We've started at the stopping point. We're staying with relatives, and we decide that we've finally gotten there. We want to have a session. They want to have a session. It's with Shannon, Roland. Roland's finally established and getting his thing. Wufang, Kakram, which you might be noticing a trend here, and more about that in just a little bit. And who else came on that? Shannon, Wufang, Kakram. I feel like one other person was there, and it might have been Xander. Regardless, the group goes to the chasm to fight the elemental, and it actually goes really well for the players. I was kind of impressed. I was kind of tired, but I still wanted to give them the session that I promised them at the end of the day. So, like I said, it's the end of the night. We get there like 11. But I still want to give them the session I promised them. So, Wufang, Shannon, Roland, Kakram, they all go to this, and Sari's the other person there. Why am I forgetting Sari? Sari's the other person there, and they all go to the chasm. They journey to the chasm together, and they go down into the chasm. They delve down into it and pierce the magical darkness. Shannon uses Shannon's sacred torch, which I think is really cool. It sort of brings that back and makes that relevant. And I thought, it's kind of nice to give them something. And why not make it from what the players are creating and role playing? I definitely want to reward that kind of innovation in my game, even though other spells will do that kind of thing. Who cares? It's really cool. I mean, The player liked it and digged it and totally thought that it was possible. We role played it out. There's a basis for it. And basically, if you role play it out in Fontera, I'll give it to you. That's really the crux of it. You role play, I'll work with you on whatever you want. I'll work with you if you'll role play it out, believably. So we've got Shannon's Sacred Torch lighting up the darkness. Now the elemental has dark vision up to 60 feet and tremor sense to 60 feet, but it's magical darkness, so it can't penetrate it otherwise. Even though it can normally see in this darkness, it's magical darkness. I think it's, I don't know if it's a daytime or nighttime adventure, but we're playing at night, so it gives us this, for me in my head, it gives us this air of a nighttime adventure. And it might have been nighttime in the game. No, I don't remember. And so they pierce the magical darkness with these torches, and they can see it because Kakram has Devil's Sight. So Devil's Sight pierces non-magical and magical darknesses alike. So Kakram can see it. And through Kakram being able to see it, he relates to the rest of the party, and they tactically get in position and get ready, and they overwhelm this elemental in one turn, 2 turns actually. But basically, due to the fact that the creature had 1 turn and was surprised the first round of combat, everyone gets their actions in. Second round of combat goes through, and it does not get to the elemental in initiative before the players wipe it out. Even though it had resistance to non-magical damages, so it halved him. Even though all these other things, they still wiped it out in 2 turns. So, kind of a flat encounter for me because I worked hard creating that monster. Well, I didn't work all that hard, but I worked to create that monster, my own in my own specifications and trying to make it balanced, and they wiped the floor with it. I guess I should have given it more HP. But I felt a high armor class and resistance was a bit much to give it a whole lot of AC. But maybe it should have had, especially for a 5-person party, 4 of which can cast spells. Might have been a little less. I might have considered that. That is one thing I don't think I realized before now that maybe I should have considered. They're a 5-person party. I knew who it was. They're a 5-person party. I didn't have much time to prep it though. Who are all coming against this creature who has resistance to non-magical damage, martial types, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. So maybe it could have done with more HP. It might have made the one martial character, Wufang the Monk, feel a little invalidated. So maybe a low AC, high HP resistance would have been great. But regardless, I wanted this creature to be weak enough to finish it off in one session that didn't take too terribly long. And at the end of the session, everyone's pretty satisfied. Xander was there. It was 6 people because Xander took a bite of it. Xander's player is prone to doing weird stuff for laughs, which is again School of Kakram, I think. More on that in a bit. So that's that session, and it was pretty satisfying, I think, for those involved. I don't think we had another session of Fontera until I got back home. The following, I want to say, it wasn't the following day. We stayed another day. It was a couple days after. I don't think we had another session until a couple days afterward. Let's see, who haven't I mentioned in this list? Shannon, Xander, Roland, Sean, Kakram. Okay. Okay, I think I know where that puts us. So, I get home, and Fontera is shaping up pretty well. Things are getting more and more established. We're sort of getting into the nitty gritty of stuff. And we have a few weeks go by where maybe people are a little bit bogged down. But when we finally get to play again, we get Lightheart. We get some brand new characters, level 1s. And this is what I implemented. This is how I learned. This is the implementation of what I learned planning it. So we have a brand new player. And this is my first brand new, never played D&D before player. So I'm being extra careful with this. And we're bringing, it's Lightheart. The brand, 3 level 1s, one of which is a brand new player. So first we have, first let's talk about Masked Machismo. Now Masked Machismo is quickly becoming a DM favorite by myself and this new co-DM. In that he is phenomenally fun to have at the table as a role player. He's role playing his character as a fantasy luchador, complete with a magical trinket that amplifies his voice like a ring mic. And he introduces his character in the Discord chat with a make-believe wrestling round, tagging in one of the fellow PCs. So they have a bit of role play, and they establish this character. So Mass Machismo is established as a character through role play as this luchador wrestler type, kind of Macho Man Randy Savage analog, and that's hugely fun. The next person I want to mention is might have been the player who helped him. I think it was Torva, who role played with him, and that's a Black Dragonborn Ranger. And I thought, perfect, Dragonborn Ranger. Not of Rangers in that game. Plenty of Dragonborns to interact with these kobolds. Seems like a great link. And finally, the second tiefling, Lisson, the tiefling warlock. Now, Lisson is played by the brand new character, Darth. So, Darth is playing Lisson. This is his first D&D character. And he's doing a really good job. And surprisingly, it's the four of them, and I think Xander. I'm pretty sure. Now, you might be noticing a trend. Again, more on that in a bit. So, we have the session. It goes pretty well. I do manage to get the three of them to get their characters established, get their their feet under them as players, and get them on this adventure. And they have again a two-parter adventure. So the first part, this one night session, they what do they do? I have drawn a complete blank on what they do. I don't remember what that first session was now. I really don't. Other than I think it got their characters established. Now, the second part of the session was super interesting. So, let me see if I check my notes if that jogs my memory, because I did make some notes about some things that they sort of rolled. At the end of that first session, they rolled I think it was a 1, and so it was a deadly encounter that I owed them. Yep, see, that's my notes from that. That's my notes from that. Let's see. Brown Bear, Merrick, Machismo, Lasone, Torva. Yep. This is the one. I rolled up some NPCs. They didn't use it. They encountered a black bear, apparently. They may or may not have fought it and killed it. I don't remember. That's another session. Xander had a solo session. Apparently between the first part and the second part. So we'll do that. We'll do that in chronological order here. So Xander has a session by himself, and I don't know how he played that. If it was before or after the thing. He was in that session, wasn't he? I want to say that he was. Merrick, Machismo, Lisona, and Torba. No, Xander wasn't there. Okay, Xander wasn't there. So instead, Xander got a solo session. So Xander decided to check out something to the south. He saw a giant statue. He decided to rent a horse and make a day's travel of it, which it did take a day's travel to get there. He had to take a long rest camping out when he got there. And that was one half of his solo session. It was about 1 hour getting him from there to he fought a kobold, again with a kobold falconer. And I'm pretty sure, I don't think he noticed the color, but it was a bronze kobold. So he fought another kobold falconer and took that on. So I'm sort of getting ideas now for what the kobolds consistently it's rolling on this encounter generator I use. It's consistently rolling kobolds with thing, and I'm always like, if a kobold comes up with one other thing, I'm like, perfect. I think it was with a giant crab actually, a kobold and a giant crab, because it was close to the sea, and I thought that was thematic, and it worked out pretty well as a reasonable encounter for what he rolled. So he decides. Let's see. Maybe make some notes before that. Okay, so notes. Xander, Roland, Sorry, Shen, and Wufong. Yep. That's my sessions over there. I'm catching up. My little notebook here. Alright, so he goes to this dungeon. It's actually a pretty interesting session, for me at least, to run. So he goes through, and I'm running on an hour and 10 minutes here. Okay. So Xander goes through this statue dungeon that he finds under the statue here. He doesn't know Elvish, I think, so he didn't get to read the description and know what it says. But he knows that there's a kobold somewhere nearby. but he decides to venture into it and check it out and try to loot it. So I narrate that he finds a few empty rooms. I'm rolling on the dice tables to see what I can sort of put here for him, knowing that he's by himself, not trying to kill him, but I'm trying to give him an interesting encounter. And I find that a mimic is a reasonable encounter for him by himself. And I thought that's perfect. Mimic is iconic. It's a one of D&D's most original creatures, the mimic. So I thought, perfect. Let's give him a mimic. That's one of the fantastic things to discover in Dungeons and Dragons. So he explores this place. He finds a few. He finds it's basically an abandoned outpost, apartment almost for something. So he's looking for secrets, and I lead him through, what was apparently a barracks, a sleeping room. I lead him through what was apparently a storage room. He finds some minor things like clothes and nice jewelry. Um, he finds I lead him through a torture room. Describe the implements he finds in this thing, and I'm on roll 20, so I'm pinging the map where these things are because I had the map, but I didn't have like any of the items placed on the map or anything to decorate it, so I just had to sort of narrate what they were and where they were. And I made the mistake, it's kind of funny, I made the mistake of actually having him on the page when I put the map in and sized it up. So he saw the whole dungeon from the start, so there was no hiding it from him or making it dynamic. Which is one thing I would have liked to have done, was to only highlight areas he'd been to, but he sort of got a fast track on it, sort of knowing it, and I sort of had to slow him down. So this is where Xander is sort of becoming like a bit of a loot whore. So Xander's looking around for stuff he can loot. I'm not giving him too much. I tell him in the torturing room he finds an orc head with a gold earring on it. It's decaying, but the earring's still nice. So he takes the earring off. This is the same guy who tasted the elemental. I made him back when he did that. I made him do a con save, and as I remember, he must have succeeded it, but barely. Anyway, so he's not disgusted by stuff that I think he should be disgusted by as a character. So that's interesting. So he takes this earring and continues on, and he's looking for secrets. And I decide, you know what? This looks like it could be a secret. Let's make it a secret. So yeah, I told him right here you look for it, and you find this secret entrance back this way. And I start, pointing him back to the bottom right part of the map. And I narrate to him this bedroom with, a nice bed, like a canopy bed, chest of drawers, a couple bookshelves, reading chair, a chair side table, a bedside table, a wardrobe, and a chest. And the chest is the mimic. I'm just waiting for him to get to the chest because I'm thinking Xander's a loot whore. What better thing to do to him than put a mimic in this room for him to encounter as he's looking for loot? And boy, did he take his time getting there. He checked the rest of the room, and I narrated what else he found, under the bed and in the drawers and in the books, and told him he finds, this nice map journal. I think he's forgotten about it, so it's kind of funny. As a character, as a player, I think he's forgotten about it. So I think it's kind of funny. I'm kind of off the hook for telling him what's on that map because I think he forgot all about it because of what happened at the end of that session. So he explores this room. He fights this mimic. He has this really interesting encounter solo where he almost bites it. And I don't say almost as he got down to, 1 HP and barely made the final attack before he got hit for all his health. I say that if not for one or two key actions, he probably would have met his end there due to the way mimics work. So mimics are adhesive. If you touch one, you get your hand stuck to it before it comes alive. So he got his hand stuck to it, and before it fully came alive, he put his other hand on it. So both his hands are stuck on this thing and grappled by it. So he cannot seem to make the roll to escape this grapple that this mimic has on it. And he almost, like I said, this almost causes him to lose the thing. As both he and this mimic are failing their rolls. This mimic's trying to attack him with a bite. He's trying to break its grapple. He eventually does break its grapple and is one-on-one with this mimic, mano-a-mano with this mimic. And, he winds up eventually prevailing. He has to pop he has one healing potion. He has to go ahead and quaff that potion. And he winds up barely surviving the encounter. He gets all the loot from the rest of the room. Like, I made sure that there was loot in the rest of the room because there would not be loot in that mimic. That's not how my mimics work. I don't care if it's how, I don't know if it is. I don't care if it's how mimics work and otherwise, but that's not how mine work. So I make sure to give him loot from the rest of the room beforehand because there was not going to be loot in that mimic. And I was just waiting for him, seeing these other things to just go up to that mimic and treat it like a real chest and try to open it and have exactly what happened happen. So it's kind of fantastic fun for me to have that for him. But it continues. He wants to examine the rest of this room. I figure that's all there's going to be. Here's a mimic. It's an old dusty tomb, except for this secret room. It's nice and clean. It's been kept off and walled off from the rest of the dungeon. And he gets to this last room of the dungeon, and I think I've done everything else I can think of. He explores this torture room. He explores these barracks. There's a kitchen here, and I figured off from this kitchen there's this room with two entrances and exits to it, and it's not it's right next to the secret bedroom. And I thought this needs to be another secret. That's all I can think of for these rooms is kitchen, and the dice rolls aren't helping. And there's a there's adult there's a limit to what winging it can get you, and a bit of planning will go a long way for me, and I'm working on that. This last room, I can't think of anything for it to be. This old elven holdout to be left for the other room, and all that was coming to mind was a sex dungeon. So I just said, "You seen the movie 50 Shades of Grey? It looks like that." Not my proudest moment as a DM. But Xander certainly loved it. He asked what kind of loot he found. I thought of every cliche kink toy I could think of: whip, manacle and chains. I even put dildos in there, medieval dildos made out of wood. I missed the chance to do like a wood joke and wood and bone dildos, and I missed the chance to make puns on those. But you live and you learn. I don't think it's something I'll be repeating very soon, but it certainly Xander certainly got a kick out of it. So if anything, it was the right thing for that player, and he really enjoyed telling other people about it. He really did. So overall, it wasn't a bad session at all, especially with it being a solo session. The only thing I wish I would have done was challenge him more to make him feel like he needed to bring other people on this. But one of the things I haven't been trying to do at this point is I've been trying to make Fontera somewhat fair. And because, like I said, I think I'd started to notice the fact that maybe people were playing it safe a lot, and that I sort of wanted to maybe encourage them to get out there more, maybe take some of that risk out. So that's sort of what I was going for with that, was to make it something that he could manage reasonably. And if I could change one thing about that, I would just have made that maybe a little more challenging to get to or to get through. I certainly would have planned it better in advance and made sure that he wouldn't have seen the entire freaking map at the start. But that's just how life goes. You live and you learn. That's just how DMing goes, I should say. You live and you learn. So to this point, so now we have Xander's solo session in the middle of the week. He's had that. This is the follow up to that. Do we have? Okay. So the second part of that session with Merrick. Actually, it's Merrick, isn't it? Yes, it's a bunch of level ones. It's Merrick, Master Magician. Merrick is Leghardt's second character, a halfling monk, Way of the Shadows monk, which I think is awesome. So the way Merrick, Master Machismo, Torva, and Lison, all level ones, go on this reasonable adventure to fight some goblins, and I made sure to give them, I think, level 2 by the end of that session. I'm pretty sure, because they came at that next session with twice their stuff, and so with level 2 stuff. And I was again going to that thing of getting them to level 2 by the end of the first session, no matter what it takes. Double their XP, do whatever. Even if I have to cheat it, if I don't really know that, even if I know that they really didn't get enough XP to earn that, even if I double it, doesn't matter. Just give it to them. But it's not too hard for level ones if they explore a few places, especially if someone else takes them, or if this player is leveling a new character and already knows about these places and decides to go to these places in character. It's perfectly fine. These landmark places, it's perfectly fine. Which I think I need to make a list of landmark places for my new co-DM here. Make a list of landmark places to give XP for when they discover them, and I think I need to make more abundance of them, and we need to work on making a map to use as a DM resource, because I've just been using the hex map that I know is there and putting stuff there as we go, sort of placing stuff there as characters, players are sort of asking for more. Pardon that buzz. I'm gonna leave that down. As players were asking for more. And now you're beginning to see the efforts of a long video, an hour and 18. So it's taking me a little bit of time to get here. We have a pretty interesting session, and they have this was like an epic session. It was I think the first session when we got back home, I'd gotten my computer set back up. You know, this computer I have used for gaming, like my video gaming, running D&D, in times when we needed to for remote summertime stuff. So this is some of the first things back on this full-fledged PC, and so I get this epic fight, a truly deadly encounter, and I decide to test something. There are 4 level 2s, I think. Merrick, Leghart, Merrick, Maspachismo, Lisoan, and Torva. 4 level 2s. And a deadly encounter. I decided to sort of make up a deadly encounter out of what I know are followers of Shar, of this particular tribe, for where they are. So I decided to make a deadly encounter. Well, actually, that's what they rolled, and I promised them for them at the start of the next session that that's what they'd get. So they know that it's coming, and I'm whipping it up once we start, which I could have taken a few minutes beforehand to whip that up, knowing it was coming. Actually, of course, I sort of had forgotten about it. I had taken down a note and made that, but I didn't remember it, but they did. So it's good that they remembered it, because consistency is key. I've learned, and if I'm not being consistent, they're gonna notice that pretty quick. So they have this deadly encounter with a bugbear, a hobgoblin captain, a priest, acolyte, and a scout. So these are all flavors of goblinoids. The acolyte and the scout are goblins. The priest and the hobgoblin captain are, of course, hobgoblins. And the bugbear is, of course, a bugbear. And it winds up being a pretty interesting fight. Thinking about it now, Xander was there for this second part of the fight. I don't know if he was there before that. But either way, this fight was pretty epic for the bunch of them, whatever they were. 5 level 2s, 4 level 2s, whatever they were. It was pretty epic. It took the whole session. This was the one time I felt that a combat was justified to take up the entire session because it was an epic fight. They rolled a 1, and they were going to have the fight of their lives. To date, which of course had been like 1 or 2. So, but still, it was cool. So we have a pretty epic drag out fight. We have enemies who have spells to mitigate the 2 barbarians, Maspachismo and Xander. We have, combat enemies. We have ranged enemies. We have melee enemies. We have the bugbear go down pretty fast as it charges the enemy. That's something I probably wouldn't have done otherwise. I did decide to have, this set far enough apart, like 80 feet apart on the map, to sort of incentivize that this fight would take place. And sort of at a distance when they see each other, and them coming to each other on the battlefield. Create a bit of tactics around that. I liked that too. I thought that was a good touch. Kind of proud of that. And I had the bugbear charge away from the hobgoblin captain, and what was interesting was it sort of went down pretty quick, and I didn't really have anything else I could do with it. I think it sort of made the players feel strong to take it down pretty quick. And before they got to the rest of the thing, they took it down to 1 round, 1 or 2 rounds, so it was pretty good between the 2 barbarians and some of the ranged. And they take the bugbear down. The priest, the acolyte, and the scout are all taking pot shots from range, doing whatever they can, whatever they're ranged for, and doing damage here and there. At the start of the fight, the Goblin Scout gets a multi-attack on Torva, hits both, and deals enough damage at his level 2 character to bring him down. The only person who takes pity on Torva and makes sure he gets back up is Roland, who had just gotten 1 potion from, I think, a Wizard's Tower exploration with Sari and Shannon. Sari leads the other 2 back to the tower, and they find some stuff. Among them, healing potions. Each of them finds a healing potion. Uh, More on that later. So this is like the second or third session since I've been home. And it's like the first big one since I've been home in terms of what happened. So things are going pretty smoothly in Fontera to this point. They have this session, and this session goes pretty smoothly overall. That particular combat was long and drawn out, but I found that I don't think the players minded that so much. I don't think the players really minded how long that took. I feel like they felt it was appropriate, as it was sort of a rare thing for it to be this hard, because several of them almost went down. Xander went down to like 1 HP. Merrick went down to 1 HP. I said Torva went down for a few rounds before Roland gave him a potion. And they in general didn't have too easy of a time with it. And in general, I had enough troops on this battlefield to do something semi-tactical with, which felt pretty rewarding for me as the DM. Playing tactically, just moving these units around the field in a tactical manner, as I've learned from tactical games that I've played, that I've enjoyed a lot. I'm sort of starting to understand their roles on the battlefield and how to make them effective and a challenge to fight, more so than I ever have before. Tactics are becoming more and more part of my game, in addition to roleplay. So I'm kind of proud of that. Um, that was a pretty interesting session. After that, everybody wound up, and so to this point, things are going pretty smoothly. I'm not hearing a lot of negativity. Not a lot of negativity. Things are sort of exploding in Fontera. We're getting more and more people. Xander's making agreements with other players to bring them into this to his plans for this thing, and I love players with plans to do stuff. That's my favorite thing in the world. We have a pretty interesting session recently. Okay, now we're catching up. We're catching up. Almost done, I promise. Now this is hour and a half already. We're almost done. So we have a pretty interesting session with Lighart taking. Who does he take with him? Torva, Sai. No, he doesn't take Torva. Roland, Mass Machismo, Lasone, Sai, my wife's new character, a human child sorcerer. Not that was a monster. No, Tora wasn't here. Okay, so I'm using my experience reskinning the goblins and hobgoblins and bugbear into other stat blocks for other things to make them interesting encounters, mixing and sort of matching to flavor them what I can. So I'm doing the same thing with orcs. So Lighart goes on a mission with his buddy now Lyric, who she's been rescued from the tower, to get Kinley back. And this is where I start to get the idea for what I can do with Kinley. Lighart takes as many people as he can. Lasone, Roland, Mass Machismo, and Sai. He takes as many people as he can. Rescue Kinley and Lyric. He takes Lyric. He takes as many people as he can to give him the best chance. This was a pretty short session, so I'm also proud of how well I paced that. So their travel was pretty short because I only knew 2 hours. It was my own fault. I delayed it long enough where I only had 2 hours because I was thinking about Kinley and what to do with her. I only had about 2 hours because Lighart had to leave to go to work, so I had to make sure it got done in 2 hours. This was like one of my biggest challenges to date in Fontera and DMing, but we pulled it off. We did it. And the way we did it was this. Travel was pretty short, but I did manage to narrate the landmarks between where they were going. Now, this was initially Roland's expedition. He wanted to investigate the smoke clouds that he'd seen to the southwest, which were bonfires for the orcs. Lighart knew that was the direction that he needed to go to rescue Kinley, and he wanted to do that for Lyric's sake, and the others wanted to go on the adventure as well. So it's mainly Roland's expedition. Lighart goes along, and this is where Roland and Lighart go great as players. Roland doesn't feel when Lighart accompanies him, even though it sort of became Lighart's sort of mission after the second half of the session. Roland didn't really mind that. I don't think he minded that at all. Torva wasn't on this though. He was going to be. That was the problem. He was going to be, but I had delayed it so long in the day because I was busy making write-ups for what Xander had done with his trying to get his agreement going. Xander's had a lot of solo sessions. get his agreement going with, and Xander's probably the most suited player to solo sessions. Honestly, he has stuff he wants to get done, and he has a lot of stuff to do, and he really just his only problem is I wish he could stay. He could amiably get with other players to make them want to play with him. So far, he's had problems making other players wish he wasn't around. So more on that in a minute. And I've had solo sessions. I'm figuring out the handouts for their session to the Mage's Tower where they find another spell book, and so I'm trying to get them handouts written up that afternoon after getting home from work for that, and I'm trying to get Xander's thing done, and it takes so long. And we have dinner. It's my wife's birthday dinner with the family, so it takes so long with all of that. By the time we get to the game that night, Torva can't play anymore. And then I spend almost an hour doing this thing with Kinley, getting Kinley's character sheet fixed up, which is totally selfish of me, and it's completely a mistake. Could left it for later. Didn't need to do it, but I was having fun with it, and I was sort of laying it. It's kind of my problem. So you can sort of see, you know, I'm sort of getting overwhelmed here more recently, and definitely have needed to take days where I'm like, okay, this is a me day. I need to take a day off. Especially if I work today, I can't work and then come home and do this. I need a day off, and part of part of that is helped now by knowing that there's a co-DM to take some of that weight off. Part of it's not helped just knowing that it's still my baby and I still have to be responsible for it and for the players and making sure they have a good time. Ultimately, that's still treat that as my responsibility. So this has taken so long, so that I only have 2 hours to do it. So my biggest challenge is my own making, but it's my biggest challenge yet. So I've made this hole, and I have to dig out of this. I have to dig out of this hole to make a successful session for Lakehart and for Roland. Those are the two people I'm most concerned with tonight. So the first part of the session I think goes pretty well. In the first 30 minutes or so of the session, they get them to where they want to by describing the landmarks. I didn't have them roll for random encounters. Instead, this was going to be more of a story-based mission. So they get to this, they find these orc burial pyres, and they find out that they're burning their dead in pyres, as in big bonfires, and that's what's creating these pillars of smoke and these mass graves by cremation that they're finding. Sort of ties things together that the characters already have known, sort of explaining them in a better way as they explore these things all together as one group. And they managed to get a lot done. And had this had, Xander Cackerman, I don't think as much would have gotten done because Xander and Cackerman don't take these things as seriously as the rest of them do. And because they're, like I said, sort of limelight hogs. But anyway, it may seem like I'm disparaging Kakram and Xander. I, I like having them as players, and I don't, you know, I don't refer other players to them, except that the other players take my role a little more seriously. But I really like Xander's initiative and what he does on his own, and his willingness to put himself out there, and forward his character's plans and just do stuff that takes the world seriously and maybe seriously, I guess. He's a player. I can tell that he's a player's invested in the world and interested in it, but his character isn't, and I think that's sort of the problem. See, again, I think that his character emulated Kakram a little bit early on, and it sort of stuck. So we get a lot done that session. So they find out they find out that these are mass graves by cremation. They find out that it's an orc burial pyre, and they track the orcs to their camp. And I described that the camp has a lot of troops in them. I described the different kinds of troops in them. I tried to describe these painted face warriors with decorated spears as seem to be like the elite of them among the orcs. These great big hulking brutes who have utter wrath and fury in their eyes, and these regular old run of the mill orc grunts, and describe the three kinds of troops that they see in the camp, and they get an estimation for how many there are. They're sort of getting to a point where they're planning that maybe they can talk it out, maybe they can fight it out, but I know we're running short on time, and I know I as the DM have to give them something to go on. So I just remind the players, you're probably aware that your main goal here, as this being helping Lightheart accomplish his thing, your main goal here isn't necessarily to fight anything and win, it's to get this one person out. You don't have to fight everything to do that. As long as you accomplish that one thing and get out safely, that's really all that matters here. You can always come back another time to wipe out this camp with greater numbers if you try, if you want. And that sort of helps nudge them in the direction that they don't have to fight it. Again, reinforcing the idea that players don't have to fight everything that's in front of them, even though sometimes as players we think that. Like I said, myself not included. An hour and a half ago I said that. Myself not included. Included. I'm not exempt from it. Um, or just remind them of that, the things that their characters would know, and helping push them along in that direction, and that helped too. They sort of went with it, I think, more because of who they are and understanding what the session was really trying to accomplish, given the time frame I had put on it with my mistake. So I remind them of this. They take that of note, and they start planning to do a nighttime quick raid and excursion, and break her out, break Kinley out of this thing and get her out. Um, to make an hour's worth of play short, they wait till nightfall. They use a distraction. Sai uses some dancing lights to try and distract them off the other way, making them think that magic's coming from around the opposite direction to give them a bit of a rope-a-dope moment. Hey, look over here. Hey, look over here. But really, we're over here. And they rush up. The melees rush up. Lyric is supporting from range. Roland's supporting from range with his crossbow. It is Lightheart, Mass Machismo. I think Lasone coming up to the cage where Kinley's being held. And Lyric has message, and I play a little game with Lightheart here, and poor guy, uh, I should have been nicer to him. So I think Kinley's gear isn't going to be stored on her. They would have taken that away from her, but there's probably not time in this mission to get it. But Lyric probably doesn't know that. So I tell Lightheart, Lyric sends you message cantrip, as they've used message to get a hold of Kinley and let her know they're coming to rescue her, and see if she's mentally well and okay and not broken. And I have Lightheart send a message to Lyric, Lightheart, her gear, we've got to get her gear. And Lightheart asks Kinley, where's your stuff at? We want to get your stuff for you. And I have Kinley respond totally against that, because Kinley wouldn't care. They're here to rescue her. They're here to get her out. She would not prioritize that, even though that stuff might be precious to her. That stuff. Here I'm sort of thinking that I could play Kinley with this plan to bring Lightheart on as co-DM. I might get to play Kinley, and that might be Kinley might be the perfect character for me to play. So that's what I'm selfishly thinking. That's what's causing me to waste an hour of game time we could have used doing this. And that's what sort of inspired this quick moment of messing with Lightheart's head. And so I have Kinley respond, "Why are you worried about that? Just get me out of here. Let's get out of here. Let's go." And he's embarrassed. And it's so funny that he believed it so seriously. I just wanted to enforce the idea that these NPCs are NPCs and are not just mouthpieces of the DM. That they will have goals, that they will have things that they want, desires that are not reasonable, and that players still have their agency to tell them no, or they might need to tell them no. So I had this idea that I'm going to play with Lightheart's head this way, and I didn't intend for it to go so hard, like for him to take it so hard. But on the other hand, it's flattering because he takes these NPCs seriously. So anyway, after this little moment of comic relief for most of us, we managed to get them, and they don't make a clean escape. They stay to fight a little bit longer than they probably should have, but they were hungry for combat, and they haven't had any yet, so they probably want to fight a few orcs and feel good about it. But they decide that, but I remind them that they need to beat feet if they're going to escape intact. They manage to linger long enough to keep the attention of the orcs, and they sort of fail stealth checks to disappear into the forest. The orcs are trailing them, and I tell them we're short on time. We're going to do this really quickly. We're going to do a skill challenge. Pick a skill you're proficient in. I don't care what. You don't even have to be exclusive with it right now. Pick whatever thing you think you could help you lose these orcs as you make your way back to safety of Trenwell. And after three successes, if you for three successes or three failures, you make that determines whether or not you succeed on this. And there's 5 players, and there's three successes, three failures. So the odds are kind of okay. So they accumulate one success and one failure. Um, they they wind up short for time, and I encourage them be quick about this. We're short for time. Someone has to leave for work here quickly, and it's my fault. So I'm trying to be as nice as I can about it, but still trying to make sure this session wraps up satisfyingly for everyone. They decide to take a gamble on. They've got 2 failures and 1 success. They really need another success. They've got 2 more players to do it. Both of them have to succeed on, I think, a DC 10 of what they're trying to do. I'm not setting the DC any higher, but they're rolling poorly. At this point, I probably could have reminded them they might have Day of Inspiration, they might have Surge of Inspiration, they might have whatever they might have to help them get advantage on the roll. But I think actually some of them did have advantage on their rolls, and they still didn't save it necessarily. Um, but whatever happened, there were 2 characters left, Lisson and Sai. They had 2 failures and 1 success. They needed another 2 successes to successfully lose these orcs on their way back. And Sai decides to let Lisson go first. And Lisson rolls a failure on what Lisson was trying to do. So that meant 3 failures had been accrued. The challenge was over. The results had to be made. So I narrate for the players as they head back to Trenwell. You make your way back to Trenwell through familiar territory, and you manage to trail the orcs all the way here. And now the orcs know where Trenwell is. And that's how we ended that session. Kinley was happy to be home. We had a little bit of role playing to do later. For the most part, I felt like it was a good end of the session because it showed failure had consequences, and also that it wasn't totally dire. But I think the players overall had a decent time. I think they probably wished it had gone better, but I think they blamed the dice instead of me. Whether that's the right thing they should have done, I don't know, but that's what I think they did. And that brings us to some of our most recent sessions. Let's see, Torva decided to, like I said, there's been a lot of D&D. Torva decided to hire some miners because he'd struck up a friendship and a partnership with a dwarven blacksmith named Pella. Some fun role playing there, and had decided to try and get some ores to help her. At first, he wanted to do it with the golden kobolds to the west, but they're far to the west, close to the mountain, which is maybe 100 miles away. It's a little bit out of the range. I didn't want to tell Torva no, but I just wanted to make it clear to him it's going to take. It's a lot. Sometimes the Ezer's messengers, take forever to come back, and sometimes they don't come back at all. But so Torva decides he hears that there's a miners guild. He wonders if there might be a miners guild, and I think I don't really want a miners guild in Trenwell. I don't know what purpose that would serve. But I decide that there's somewhat of an established monopoly of miners in the city, and that it's hard for new miners to get established because of this monopoly. So I tell him there are 3 unsigned miners who will need who don't need a whole lot of money to get set. He decides with this payout that he's just gotten from something that he sold. I can't remember what he got that he sold for a lot of money, but he had something along 100 gold. Oh, I know what it was. He worked on with his ally, his partner Pella, and his business partner Pella. He worked on getting something repaired and sold, and I ruled that whenever they get something and improved, whenever they do something, if he would improve it, it would improve the sell price of this particular piece, and so this particular piece would sell for 110 gold, which was 10 more than its full price would. And I usually have things sell for half price when they're selling it back to vendors, but they were trying to sell it through Pella's thing, and I figured she would sell it at full price to like a potential adventurer or something like that. So that's what Pella would do. So he has this money he just got, and it's burning a hole in his pocket. So he hires all three of these new miners: Pip, a burly human male; Thedra, a female high elf with who's honest; and Drazel, a female tiefling with a Gentile manner, who looks like maybe she might have a better life as a barbarian, but has chosen to become a librarian. Two different things, but has chosen to be a miner. That I was gonna sneeze. Oh well. So Torb decided to hire all three of them for 3 months, for 2 months. I worked out a price that they would work for 6 silvers a day. That was based on a midway between a poor and a modest lifestyle. So that's where about I thought a working person would get. So 6 silvers a day for he wanted to have them for 60 days, all three of them. So that math comes out to 6 silvers a day times 60 days is 360. Multiply that times three people to pay that much to, it's 1080. 1080 silver pieces, 108 gold pieces. I tried to talk him out of it to let him know he does need to do that. I even had him he even wanted to make a persuasion check against the NPC. I had the NPC tell him, you know, we might not want to work all that long for you. Maybe let's try a trial period of 2 weeks. Because I kind of wanted him to have some leftover money. He was also talking about going to buy some potions. I'm always trying to get players to go to the potion shop and try to talk to the couple who runs that shop. But he just won't do it. And I just realized it's not any good trying to convince him not to do it. He's just going to do it. I'll have to try some other way to get potions in these players' hands. Because I tell players all the time, party balance isn't a thing in my games. You don't need a healer. You can take short rests. You can get an NPC cleric to come with you to heal you. You could get healing potions, but I think they're starved for money, and I don't think they can afford potions. What I've done is try to get potions cheap into the hands of players, and I've even gone as far as making them 10 gold if they'll bring the ingredients from Fontera, sort of something to do while they're in Fontera to help me fill out their sessions. But I just can't get enough players to do it. I've gotten Roland there. Roland on a solo session wanted to take. Okay, Roland went with Sari and Shannon to the Wizard's Tower. He brought back a Raptorling, as did Sari. So he brought back a Raptorling tied off. He wanted to sell it to an NPC who would have someone who would run a menagerie, some type of menagerie. So I figure that yeah, there's somebody in Trenwell that we can do that with. So we do this solo session of it's kind of fun. It's a night session. We play it with Roland gets it's this menagerie. It's a halfling woman with weathered skin who's got scars from working with these animals for so long, and I tell him all the different types of animals that she's got. I'm looking at all the 0 CR creatures and thinking up a few flavors of those. And basically, exotic animals like tigers and stuff, and also normal animals, and also some aquatic animals, different things that she would have, but nothing too magical or crazy. Those raptorling would probably fetch a high price. So the higher end of what the higher end of what her menagerie animals go for is 50 gold. So he makes a deal with her that she wants him to bring back more creatures like this, but he doesn't want to be tied down like that. So he says, you take this one. She wants him to take, you take this one, and maybe I might bring you back another in the future. And she says, you tell me where these things are, I can get more of them, and that'll be enough. I'll give you an extra 25 gold on top of 50. And he's sort of like, okay, I'm not really interested in that. I don't want you to risk your life. And so, again, I can't force him to do it. I'm just trying to convince him to do something I think would be cool, which is, get more miles out of this halfling NPC, because I give her a whole crazy voice and everything. And it's quiet now. It's the middle of the night. I'm not going to do it here because it's kind of loud to do it. But, oh gosh, an hour 47. This is going to be the longest video of my life. I'm almost done. We're almost done. Okay? Almost done. Promise. Okay. So Roland's solo session ends with him. He has a lot of stuff he wants to do. He wants to go to the wall, maybe see if he can use his military rank to get some information from some of the soldiers there. He wants to see about. Oh gosh, I have to check my direct message from him. What did he want? Bringing back the Goblin Prisoner. So we had a lot of stuff. So let's see. He had stuff from the tower session he wanted to get done in between this other goblin session he was trying to get done. So he's got a lot to do in the short amount of time. It's kind of hard to get him fixed up with the time to do all this. Um, so the first thing he wanted to do was take the Magi to take the Raptorling to the Magi, and I told him the Magi's not interested in it. It's a bunch of work to her. She wouldn't be interested in that. Uh, she'd be intrigued about it after hearing about the info dump at the tower of the Feywild portal, and said she'd like to read the journal when she speaks to Sari, but she's not interested in the Raptor. So that's what gets rolling on this thing to try and find, uh, you know, a vendor or in something in the bazaar who might be interested in selling the pet for as much as he can get. That's reasonable. He just want to keep it, so he's trying not to be too high up there. He also wants to, train with the Magi, and in his off time, visit the wall and talk shop with the soldiers, set up friendly relations, get info about the town, history about the military, knowledge the military might have about Fontera, and how Trenwell's military is structured. He wants to get an audience with the military leader of Trenwell if he can. He might save that for after bringing back his goblin prisoner. So this goblin prisoner he has from this goblin session where they fought, where I told you level twos, not the level twos, where Torva Roland, Xander, Mass Machismo, and Merrick fight this epic fight against the goblins. Well, they take the goblin acolyte prisoner because Merrick leaves him alive. Merrick is like the only person who thinks of leaving people alive, but he does, and so they decide to take him captive, take him prisoner. So they want to interrogate the prisoner. So Roland on his solo session, I get Roland to let's see. Okay. So I get Roland's business finished up with the halfling menagerie event, and get him off to talking after this money he's got now. Get him off to talking with the the potions vendors, the potion and herbalism shop. There's one established one and a couple of maybe less more shady ones, but this is the best reputation one. So I had a couple running it. I had Voldo and Velda. Voldo talks like this. He's a very thick accent. He's a little foreign. He's interested he jokes with Roland a little bit, and so he gets Roland. And this is how I get Roland to get this idea of gathering ingredients. I promise this is the only video that's going to be this long. He gets Roland this idea to get these ingredients from the wild. This is a month's worth of stuff. It's taking it taking 2 hours is actually be condensing a lot of stuff. So it's kind of good. So this is solo sessions with everybody. This is group sessions. This is everything that's happened in the last month, 2 months, whatever. So he visits that. He decides, I'm taking notes on what this is. That'd be fine if you want to give me the notes on what it is. That's on the ingredients of a potion. It's a heart flower. It's a gold leaf. It's earth rub, and it's some mushrooms. And these are all ingredients I think they're cool, but it's because I come up with them. So players might not care about them, and that's fine. But this is how I can get potions in the hands of my game being around the PHB, potions in the hands of players for less than 50 gold to get their entire account, but also give them something in Fontera to do a little bit. And so far, I've only gotten a couple players to even know about it. I'm kind of lamenting that I don't have that. Maybe I should put that in there. It's like, look, you hear this, that may be a thing I need to do now. I'm starting to find out that maybe I just need to tell them, you hear this. This is rumor, hearsay here. So whatever it is. So Roland gets some time with that. He decides to do with Matt. We get all that stuff done for Roland. Roland also runs a session going to the tower. Shannon, Torva, and Xander go to talk to the Blue Kobolds, and you know, Torva, Xander's kind of tagging along without Torva's permission, and I didn't know that, so it's causing a problem here. And Shannon and Torva, um, Torva wants Shannon to introduce Torva to the Azur's kobolds, and help produce a good alliance, of help further his goals of finding ore, help find some other things he's trying to build upon, and Xander tags along on this, and Torva's session's kind of dragged down by Xander being there. And when I say that, I mean that Xander's getting in the way of what Torva wants to do, because Xander's taking up the session time doing stuff Torva doesn't care about. And it's irritating Torva, because it's supposed to be Torva's session, but this has wound up becoming, due to my not knowing that this was a misstep on Xander's part, this is becoming a session where most of it is being taken up by Xander's combat, proving himself after he's rude to the kobolds. So, another instance of player A takes the world seriously, resents it when player B doesn't, and gets in the way of their game time. And so I'm having to crack down on that. So Shannon and Torva are working together on this, and Xander tags along, and eventually they get what they're doing done. Right after this, Roland takes an expedition with some of those characters to the tower. Unfortunately, because it's back to back like this, and the other characters have already been playing together for several hours, it sort of feels like Roland's tagging in on someone else's session. It isn't like that. This was supposed to be his idea. So I'm sort of feeling for, maybe I need to finesse the situation with the players a little bit more and less with the character, and just as much to do with the characters, which is what Fontera is becoming. Another reason to have a co-DM who maybe can be a little bit more personal with the players and maybe get a little bit more information on that thing. It becomes a problem of Kakram's joining in with Xander. Xander and Kakram are not meshing with Roland and Shannon and Torva, and it's becoming this mad race. They're exploring the ancient Overwatch, and there's nothing left. As far as I remember, Will and Ligard's expedition took all the loot there was to get, and I don't remember there being anything else. But Ligard remembers it differently, so bit of a mistake on my part. I could have given them something, so they start racing to find something. That might have helped, because they start deciding, check out that they figure out there might be a basement there, and so I have tell them to pick high or low on a luck roll, a percentile dice, and a percentile on DD10, whatever it rolls. If it's high, and if it's above 50 and they said high, that's what they are looking for will happen. And I've done this a couple times. If I don't know if they're I don't have a reason really for there to be or not to be. I'll leave it up to chance, and players seem to like the rolling the dice and the luck of the draw there. It seems a neutral party for them to go in on. So unfortunately, because this was Roland's thing, and the other characters like Kakram and Xander are sort of getting in the way of that, I'm sort of realizing that maybe some players don't need to be playing with other players. The problem is, Fontera is supposed to be a game where everyone can play with whoever can go, or whoever they want to play with. And I start to realize I need to promote the idea that you as a player and your character both need to be the kind of people other players and characters want to take with them on their adventures. So the Fontera becomes less this, and I'm starting to realize this problem that I've been having of dropping in and picking up games and playing when they want to play and not giving me time to prepare whatever it is, and expecting just to have something happen that particularly Will and Kakram and Xander are prone to. And so I'm starting to realize the source of the problem. Some people have misinterpreted this intention for Fontera to be a flexible game as a game for them to pick up whenever they can, whether they want to, like a board game or a video game, for them to pick up and they can just get their jollies. So I'm starting to realize that attitude isn't going to fly. It's pissing off the other players. Shannon isn't amused. Torva isn't amused. Roland isn't amused. As a matter of fact, this session almost didn't happen. I come back from it. We decided to take an hour break for lunch, for dinner yet all day. This is the reward I get for running D&D all day, by the way. I hadn't eaten since I gotten home from work that afternoon. We play all this session. We play this session out. We get all this stuff done. I decided we need to take an hour break for lunch. I need a chance to eat, take a break. I've been running D&D all day. Actually, I think this was my day off. And I've been running D&D all day. By the time I got up until that point, I was tired. So I needed a break. I needed dinner and I needed a break, something that wasn't running D&D or thinking about running D&D. And I come back from an hour break and I'm ready to go. Kakram and Xander are shooting the breeze about their other D&D characters. And I'm starting to realize the other players aren't taking kindly to this, and I as the DM am in a special position to make a point. So I decide I'm going to sit around and wait to see if anyone decides to push the game to start. Say, hey, ready to start, let's get this going. No one does. And part of it is because Shannon and Kakram, sorry, not Shannon, Kakram and Xander will not stop derailing conversation about what they're doing. So I decided to watch YouTube videos for a while and chill out until they get their act together. After 30 minutes, it still hasn't happened. So I decide to make a point. I leave chat and say in chat, ping me when you are ready. And they say, they've been ready. And I say, it doesn't sound like it. You're talking about other stuff. You're wasting everyone's time. You are not ready. Torva is sending me a message. And I'm making sure I know, and Torva know, it's not directed at you, it's more directed at Kakram and Xander. I am trying to make a point. And Torva says, don't worry, I feel the same way you do. And I said, that's good. So I get back in chat after I've made clear they need to respect others' time. So I get back in chat with them, and I make the point out loud to those players. No one cares about your other character in your other campaign. It's great that you have another campaign to play in. It's great that you're having fun with it. We do not care. I do not care. The other players do not care. And you are wasting their game time by taking up this valuable session time to talk about something they do not care about. This gives Shannon room to agree. Finally, having made a point, we get the session on. So it became clear that Shannon was ready and waiting. Torva was ready and waiting. Roland was ready and waiting. They were looking for me to make a point. They were looking for me to put a stop to it. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to do it. So I did what I could and made a point about you need to respect other people's time when you come to my table. So this is the session that Roland's talking about when he says it feels like jumping in the second part of their game and, sort of feeling like other people are trying to fight something. I did do one thing right. Noticing that Roland and Torva were staying up on the roof away from this mad dash back down to trying to find a basement to the stupid tower, I stopped to ask Roland, is there something you would like to do while you're up on the tower? While these two bumbling morons and Shannon, their parent figure, I guess, are coming down to the ground floor. Roland says nothing they want to do. He's just taking notes of these smoke clouds. This is before the mission to rescue Kinley, so this is what leads him into that. He's taking note of the smoke clouds because I gave him something from up there to investigate. So this session leads me to believe that maybe I need to start addressing these problems with problem players irritating the rest of my group because they're pissing off my other players. And I don't want that to happen. I value all my players' good time. I think it's great that Kakram and Xander always have a good time and joke and it's great that Xander's so invested in the game and doing all these things. They just need to get out of everyone else's way when they want to do that type of stuff and not waste everyone's time. And I know it's too shallow when I'm thinking about this at this point in time. It's too shallow to say, if it's not your primary game, it's not game at all, because I want there to be more room than that, for Fontera to be what it is. And I sort of take the position of reinforcing that I just need to reinforce respect everyone else's time. If you don't have the time to invest in it, I have made the statement before this point, if you do not have the time to invest in this full session, do not try to drop in on it. It is not respectful of other players. And so I'm having these repeat problems with Kakram and with Xander. And Will has already I've already asked Will to leave at this point. Will I had talked to about coming into co-DM, and it seemed that he wanted Fontera to be that kind of, pick up and play game. He wanted to be that side of the DM in it. He wanted it to be things that it wasn't, and he sort of wanted to edge me out of it. And I was like, I'm not really down with that. I'm not comfortable with you being here anymore after that. I prefer you leave. And he did. Peacefully and without stirring up a fuss. And for that I'm grateful. So I'm starting to realize I have these problems that need to be dealt with. And so I start realizing I'm going to need to be a little more aggressive. By this point, things are starting to pick up in pace. A lot is starting to happen. Like, what's been happening in the last few days? Um, they're trying to run. Um, so a new character, Olv, is played with. Yeah, I'm still not caught up on my players yet, am I? Olv has been trying to find an entrance for a week or so now. Olv Skovka. I'm trying to get all that set up, and eventually we did get him set up. And Olv played a session with who was it? Merrick, Torva. I think Xander was there too. And they played a session. They fought. What did they fight? They followed up. Torva was using his primeval awareness as a level 3 ranger to his favorite enemy orcs to seek out his favorite enemy, the orcs. And so I described to him, ping this radar. This is after the orcs have been led back to Trunwell. There's this war party that's a mile off to the southwest, and so they go to engage with this war party, trying to fight it off. And they fight it off. It's a berserker, two tribal warriors, and two orcs. So they fight it off. They have a pretty good session. Everything goes pretty well. Ulf has a great first session. I make sure that Ulf has a good first session. This is Ulf's first session. Not a new player to the game, but a new player in my game. And so Ulf has a good first session. I'm happy. I've just got two new players who I haven't played yet, Furdish, and Rathbone. Rathbone is Torva's friend. I am supremely happy that Torva is bringing his real life friend into my game. This makes me realize I am getting more respect for my game out of Torva than I am people who are pissing him off. So I'm like, I need to do something more about that. So tonight, after talking with, okay, here's the cool thing. All right, so finally, we come to this point this last week where I get to play, and I've been uh, talking with Ligart's player long enough to get him in on this. So I finally get to play in my own setting, my own character that I selflessly made, taking away time from his game session. He's generously offering to DM this for me in a solo session to get a feel for this. So we play a session, and Kinley, Kinley's first adventure. Well, first we have a bit of roleplay, which is great. Roleplay is what I'm all about. So I get to roleplay Kinley coming to see Lyric and Lightheart. And Lyric asks how Kinley is. Kinley's like, I'm on the bend. At least I can say that much. And they're both sort of recovering from what happened when their guildmates all died. Gandra and Fandral and Galset at the tower. When we found that out, and I'm sort of working on that backstory. And Kinley starts to tell the story of to Lightheart of how it happened, and Lightheart makes a brief stop where we sort of switch DM seats, which was kind of fun. We switched DM seats. First Brandon's DMing for me, and then I DM for Brandon as Lightheart goes to talk to the mage to get his weapon identified because he has this enchantment on his longsword that he took from this +1 mace that he took off the Hobgoblin Priest, which is a charge touch enchantment. So he's had it changed to be usable from character of a neutral or evil alignment to a character of neutral or good alignment. But the enchantment of +1d6 necrotic damage has still stayed somehow. And I didn't think about that, so I just decided it stayed that way. I'm not sure why. I just forgot about it. Either way, we decided, he decided he could work with that. So we have that session, we have that scene pretty quickly and move on to the rest of the adventure. And we kind of figure out that Kinley's first adventure into Fontera, after coming back from this, is back to the abandoned ancient Overwatch, which I thought was totally fitting for Kinley, after what all she's been through so far. So I think that's perfect thing for her to come up on. So Brandon DMs this great session where Kinley, Lyric, and Lightheart go out to the tower, and because he's DMing it and I'm playing it, he's giving combat control of the NPCs to me and taking RP control of the NPCs, which I think is fantastic. So we come upon the abandoned Overwatch and find some kobolds who are looting it, some bronze kobolds who are looting it. I don't know yet that they're bronze kobolds. I know that they're metallic. My investigation check was too low. So I know that they're metallic kobolds, and I can guess they're one of the bad ones, who are looting this thing, and they're shouting into some deep-voiced companion who's inside the tower as they're bringing out some of the weapons and gear that were left in it. And this is when I discovered there was some left there, huh? Oh, okay. My bad. So we have this, so I had to make this battle plan. So my idea is on this map that Brandon has taken the time to redraw. What I have had a map generator program create. He's redrawn it in Incarnate. It looks so much better. So he's redrawn this battle map and given it a bit of a new spin, and he's put the tower on it, and he's put the kobolds on it, and he described how they're interacting with what their deeper voice companion, who I can't see inside the tower, is doing. So I decided that we need to take out the kobolds silently, and so the best way to do that is for me to sneak around to the flank, Ligart and Lyric to draw their attention because Ligart is can protect Lyric from assault, while I pick them off from behind and keep from getting detected that way to try and do it quietly. Had I been thinking about this, I might have tried it a little differently. Had still had Ligart distract them, but instead of just outright shooting them, trying to get a little bit of surprise on them by pulling a little bow and go, "Look over here! I'll kill you. Stay quiet. You make a sound, I'll shoot you with an arrow." But I didn't think of that. What you just shows to show players will kill stuff first, and next time I play, I'll think more about that kind of approaching it from that kind of angle instead of going in arrows blazing. But anyhow, I killed a few. I use my luck feat to make sure that these are hitting these kobolds. I use my luck feat. These are hitting these kobolds and make sure that they kill them. And Hunter's marking them, and that adds extra damage, which is plenty satisfying. Let me tell you, doing a whole chunk of damage. I now realize why my friend Brenda loves playing one of these so much. It's a huge chunk of damage, so I like that a lot. I've always wanted to play an archer character who does a lot of damage. Totally fun. So, take the shot. I take the shots on both these guys. We knock them out. And which time their compatriot, Brandon describes as this big, bulky kobold. Taller and stronger looking. Not quite a dragonborn, but more than a kobold. And I thought, something between a kobold and a dragonborn. This is intriguing. This is something that Brandon's created for his games that I've never thought about, and it's kind of interesting to me. It's new. It's this discovery thing of something I didn't create. I didn't think about it, and so it's new for me. I get to discover it. I get to discover it whole cloth, in character and as a player. So I decide tactically speaking, thinking tactically as Kinley would. The best thing to do is to breach the door. Lyric and I, with our ranged weapons, will stand on the sides of the door, peeking in. Ligard will open the door and provide a tank the any hits. We open the door and find that there's no things, and the creatures have escaped to the next level. So we go up to the next level and open the trap door. Ligard first, Kinley second, and then Lyric third. We open the trap door to the second level, and there's some kobolds there who take some shots at us. We have Kinley, I think. We have Ligard going to melee. Excuse me. We have Ligard going to melee. Rather, I have Ligard going to melee. And Lyric cast Fairy Fire on these kobolds, so Ligard can see them, and we can get advantage in combat on them. Because I want to take them out without expending another one of my luck points to do so. So we do that, and kobolds succeed their saving throws and have no effect. Ligard fails his dex save, and now he's lit up and the enemies are not. But it winds up okay. He doesn't take too much damage. We wind up wiping out one of the kobolds. I think this big brute kobold sees that his allies are not going to survive without him, and he can't just leave them and fight us on his own. He needs them to provide pack tactics for him. So he comes down to try and assist this one remaining one. We bring Lyric up in here. By the way, they've been throwing weapons down at us from the level above a turn or two each time we've ascended. And so I think we're on the third floor by this point. We're fighting him, and he's come down from the fourth floor where they were previously raining down more weapons at us. And they've done a little bit of damage to us, not much. But we try to protect Lyric by having her under the trap door, so she's not vulnerable to the attacks. But I start getting paranoid that this guy is going to thrust his big sword through the door panels and hurt Lyric in some way. And so I decide to bring Lyric up with us. So Lyric is up in the room with us, and this bulking kobold guy unleashes a breath weapon at us. He unleashes it in a line at Ligard and then me, and both Ligard and I make our saves and half the damage. Actually, Ligard fails his dex save, but I succeed mine and half the damage. It's like 4 damage. It's like 1 point off the lowest damage this breath weapon could roll on 3d10. So 3d10 breath weapon, and it hits for 4 damage on a failed and 2 on a succeed. So it's Ligard for 4 and 2 for me. So Brendan flavors it as Ligard absorbs most of it, but some of the overwhelming from his metal conducting armor comes back to me, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. Brandon rolls to see if it recharges, and it recharges immediately. The very next turn, this enemy, Brute, Kobold Brute, flanks us and catches me and Lyric in the line, and downs Lyric and nearly downs me in one thing, because he rolled high damage on this one, and we both, I succeeded my saving throw and she failed hers. So she took the full brunt of damage, taking her down to nothing, to unconsciousness, and took Mio down to almost nothing. And I thought Kinley would not react well to Lyric being downed. In fact, she might lose any or all reason. So I'd go in with melee with the short sword I picked up, and I'm not good at melee. As this character I built by intention, I'm a ranged character, but this is how I feel she would react to her friend's life being endangered. At first, I think Lightheart needs to, go up in melee and stop this guy from getting more free attacks on us because he's charging at us as he unleashes his breath weapon. But Lyric's down, and I have to roll a medicine check if I'm going to bring her back to stable. But if Lightheart lays hands on her as a paladin, he can bring back 15 point of her HP. And I think, I, as Kinley, want Lyric to be as safe as possible. I would say heal her for as much as you can, not thinking that if I go down, I might need someone to pick me up too, because I have no healing potions, and no one else has any healing. Problem. So, without that, I'm kind of lost, because I'm trying to melee with this guy and failing at it. Thankfully, Lyric is viciously mocking him, and he is failing the saving throws badly. So he's taking the damage and getting disadvantage on his weapon attacks. Lightheart has protection fighting style to grant to oppose disadvantage on his melee attacks on allies who are within 5 feet of Lightheart, who Lyric is. So that actually I am and Lyric is, because of where Lighart's positioned to the side and behind me by 1 square, and next to Lyric by the next square. So he's able to do that, and thankfully he steps up in melee, takes in 2 successive combat rounds, 2 successful swings of the sword, rolling high damage on both of them, and due to the enchantment on that sword, downing this Kobold Brute, which I'm immensely thankful for. Vicious Mockery, succeeding, to do damage and grant disadvantage on his attacks roll both times. Lightheart dealing damage, high damage both times, downing him and removing most of the threat from him. I was genuinely scared for my character and for Lyric, both in character and out. Put it that way. I was genuinely scared, but it was a blast. So honestly, it gave me tons of ideas, because as a player, I'm thinking, these kobolds were looting this place, and they sent this big brute to accompany them to make sure it got done. They're supposed to be important to them, but moreover, they must have been taking these weapons somewhere. They must have a base nearby. I'm thinking as a player, and it's pretty cool that that's what happened in this game that I get to play for the first time in this world I created. And it's one of the joys of having a co-DM to do that with. I had a great time. This was all last night. I had a fantastic time with it. Brandon, if you're watching this, thank you. That was fantastic. You watched all 2 hours and 16 minutes of this. You are fantastic for DMing that and for watching this. And I get to the point after this where I'm so tired after everything, staying up late the previous night and going to church that morning and being up for this. I go right to bed. And I get up today and I go straight to work, and I come up from this, and now I'm catching up on all the stuff on Fontera. And I've been talking with Brandon, and I'm like, I need to make Torva's upset about Xander dropping out of sessions. It's pissed off so many people, and so I realized that I need to do something about it. So I make an announcement today. So here's what I say. So I have decided I need to make an announcement. So I start communicating after I get back with all my messages and make all my, catch up all my private messages and make all my mentions, reply to my mentions, and get everything thing. I make one announcement. I say, recently I've noticed a trend I feel like I would like to snuff out. I intend to prepare. Actually, I'm not going to read this to you. I basically tell them that I've noticed this trend that I want to cut out. I explain I've intended for Fontera to be flexible, and it seems that means different things to different people. And so I clarify what I meant. So I say you're intended to have goals, to organize parties with other players, to get those things done. You are not supposed to drop in on others' planned sessions without first checking, at least, with the organizer of the session. I put in caps, do not ask me if it is okay. It is not my call. I am the DM and I love all my players and PCs, but you are intended to have to work together to get things done, which means you will need to play a little mini game of making other players want you in their games. Let this count as the first and last. I guess I am reading this to you. Let this count as the first and last warning about this. I do not have time, nor do I wish to impose in on Brendan to mediate player differences. As I said, I love all my players and their PCs. One of the greatest joys of my DMing is getting to work with you and make your characters more fulfilling for you, and that's true, it is. I have a lot of fun with my players, and I embrace the element of surprise you bring to DMing for you. But don't think for a minute I will allow one player to ruin another player's fun. You have been warned. This might sound harsh, but I wouldn't say this if I didn't truly need to. I love everyone here. You're one of the best communities I have had the privilege to take part in, which is true, it is. Let's all work together to make Fontera and the adventurers as epic as they can be. So I put that out, and I'm hoping that it makes everyone realize, okay, I'm not really hoping it does a whole lot. I'm doing it to give me objective grounds to discipline the players who are violating this, um, who I'm pretty sure know my stance on it. Like I said, I made the announcement before. You're not supposed to do this. Drop in other people's games. Honor that by coordinating with them and planning it out rather than jumping in last second. And don't jump in. Don't try to join something you don't have the full time for it. It's rude. And I think they know my stance on it. But some people like Kakram still do it. So recently, he tried to jump in on a session that wasn't his. Didn't talk to anyone about it. So I decided to server mute him, server deafen him, and just ask the other players who were in chat, did he ask to join this? Did he coordinate with anyone? Did he, make an effort to say that he wanted to join this at all? And everyone said no. So I said, this is before I made this announcement. So he tried to join this without permission or anything. I said, okay. So I left him server deafen and muted because I didn't have time to do that. I wasn't going to let him doing that, disciplining him, get in the way of that session for those players. Those players deserve to have that session underailed. I've made enough mistakes lately as a DM to make sure I want to get this the best position I can possible. So I made the decision to try to not let that get in the way of that session and to get that session done before my mouth is starting to get dry. Before, which is a miracle, 2.5 hours of talking, my mouth is only starting to get dry. So I made the thing to say, this is not getting in the way of your session. I'll deal with this afterwards. So we have a great session with those players. And I kick Kakram out of Roll20 so he can't interrupt that thing because it keeps typing in there. And I'm realizing that's what's going on. He's trying to do this half-baked thing where he's listening in from work and he can join up later. And for right now, he's going to listen in and type what he wants to do. And I'm like, I've allowed that before, and it's kind of what I was talking about. And I think he knows how I feel about it, but he's still doing it. So I'm like, okay, I have to discipline. I'm noticing this from Kakram, this from Xander's pissing people off, and so I'm like, okay, I've got to do something about this. So I made this announcement, and I'm giving myself grounds to discipline these players and kick them out of the game if I need to. Because honestly, Kakram isn't making anyone's games better. He's making his game better, but not anyone else's games better. Xander is not doing a whole lot for anyone else's game. He's doing plenty but he's putting a lot of work on me. But he's not helping out with others. But he sort of has more of an awareness to him when I bring these things up, and I stress them to him. That we'll see how he goes. But if he doesn't get with the program, he's gonna have to get out. It gives me grounds to deal with Kakram now. So now I can deal with Kakram. If Kakram doesn't want, because Kakram can still send messages, he just can't do that until he's done that. And as soon as he's done that, I can do that, or Brandon can do that. Can take off his server deafen. But until he does that, he doesn't get that, and he won't get invited back to Roll20 either. And so if he doesn't get with the program, he gets kicked. So I'm trying to get rid of these things that are pissing off my good players, because I don't want to lose my good players to keep my bad ones. That's not what I'm trying to do with Fontera. So what I'm doing is trying to establish, this precedent of dealing with these problems before they become absolutely game ruining. Because right now they're annoyances, but they will become absolute game ruining if it goes long and long enough and pisses people off long enough. That's not to say that I have to respond to every character, every player being pissed off about something. We're all going to be pissy at some point, but a little bit. But to forsake my players who are respectful of my world, respectful of each other's time, and productive, for these players who drop in uninvited on their sessions and don't coordinate with them is heinous. So I've got to put a stop to it, and that's what I'm doing. I finally mostly caught up with stuff. Roland and because Olv speaks Goblin, Roland and Olv have gotten together to interview this Goblin captive that Roland has, and they found a lot of information from it. Found out about the different types of goblins that there are. You know, followers of Shar, and what the Goblin has called Dum Dums, who are basically the military goblins, your traditional goblins, not reskinned and just regular goblins and hobgoblins above by stat blocks. Maybe with a scout or something like that, but not much more. You know, if they're lone goblins. Um, and there's two tribes, and trying to get established where they are, and they're sort of, and I've gotten really behind. So hopefully now I've gotten caught up, gotten my write up done for my last night's session, gotten all my messages responded to, gotten everything done, got this video made, gotten everything caught up. So now I don't have a backlog of work to do on Fontera, and I can deal with things more on a thing by thing basis, and not feel overwhelmed when I have, you know, 2 notifications pop up and I'm trying to sleep, and 3 more popped up when I slept, and now I have 5 notifications. I don't have room to deal with any of them on my brain. Maybe, hopefully, that will be curtailed. But now it's 5 a.m. and I need to stop this video. Um, so this has been Campaign Diaries 3 through 20 something, I guess. And we'll just pick it up at, we'll just call this 3, I guess, and pick it up at 4 next time in a few days when there's something to report. So until then, I'll see you, and hopefully I get some rest. Bye bye.